whenever you're ready, just let me know. We can start.
We're streaming. Streaming.
All right, great. Thanks, Lawrence. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take roll before we get started. Jeanette Butterworth. Joel Ford. I see you. Bruce Friend. Rita Hare. Lynn Kroger.
Here.
Hilda Perlay.
Present.
Alex.
Present.
Sherry Reeves.
Here.
Cheryl Turner.
Here.
Heather Van Cannon.
Here.
And Stephen Walker.
Here.
All right. Let's see. If you are not speaking, if you could please mute yourself. And then if you are not an applicant, if you could turn your camera off, that would be great. When it's your application time, we will ask you to turn your camera off, but otherwise we turn them off just to conserve the bandwidth, if possible. Thank you. All right. Looks like we're ready to go, Alex, whenever you are.
Great. Welcome, everyone, to the September 15th North Carolina Charter Schools Advisory Board meeting. We'll ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and we will recite it on 3. 1, 2, 3. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and justice for all.
All right. At this time, I will review the mission statement and ethics statement. The Charter Schools Advisory Board works to ensure the existence of high-quality charter schools in North Carolina. Board members are reminded as part of our ethics statement that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of the Advisory Board. Does any member of the Advisory Board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters before us at this meeting? If so, please state them now for the record. All right. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in the discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. And I will be recusing from the renewal discussion today because my charter school is up for renewal. Any questions will be led by Ms. Cheryl Turner.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bruce Friend too. Same situation with my school.
Okay. So review the agenda for today. We'll start with Ms. Cooper, Dr. Cooper's renewal updates, hear from cyber, go over our access work, and then have an update from Three Rivers. Ms. Porter will provide an update on our enrollment updates for schools that have opened, new schools, and then we will discuss the virtual charter school report, the pilot report by Ms. Vaccaro. Then we will finish the meeting with interviews, and today I believe we have a change to the agenda. Spartan Charter School has withdrawn their application, and Ms. Vaccaro, we can, take a lunch break, take a break from 11 to 12 if that's best for everyone. That might actually be helpful, and just pick up Old Mainstream at their allotted time. Or we could try to move it up. I guess what's the pleasure of the board at this time? And what's easiest for the Office of Charter Schools?
I think whatever works for you guys. We've been in contact with Old Mainstream, and I think they could make either time.
Okay. Any preference among board members? All right, great. Well, why don't we just plan to start at 11 o'clock with Old Main Stream, and then we'll have Director Machado's updates immediately following that, and hopefully adjourn around lunchtime.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the proposed changes to the agenda. Do I have a motion for approval?
This is Jeanette Butterworth. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Bruce Friend. I'll second.
Okay, properly moved and second. Any discussion? We'll take a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. So agenda has been revised and approved. And at this time, we'll hand it over to Dr. Cooper.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me time today. I just wanted to give you a very quick overview of the schools that you'll have a report on starting next month. So there are a total of 18 schools, and we'll be moving forward with the data that we have as discussed. So this is just a snapshot for you to see what you need to get prepared for. Do you all have any questions regarding the report this year?
Dr. Cooper, I think we made the decision to just use 2 years of data. Is that correct?
We are going to use whatever data is present on their data sheet. For some schools, they have 3 years. Some schools have 2, because a lot of these schools are their first renewal cycle. They've only been open for 4 years. And so they would only have 2 years to look at. So yes, that is correct.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair and Ms. Cooper, but I must recuse from Peak Charter.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I think Matthew's charter as well.
Okay. So other than that, the report will move forward as normal. The difference is we won't be waiting on data to come in, which is why we are prepared to do a full report in October. We usually do have to wait for the new data to come in, so it kind of delays, but it's ready to go.
So, Shonda, will you break these down as you have in the past with, the ones that OCS will recommend for a 10-year renewal and
Right.
the fourth one, certification?
Yes, ma'am. I'll definitely do that. I took all the suggestions from last year and have moved it into the process for this year. So the spreadsheet that you all enjoyed using last year, creating that for you to have this year as well, with the breakdown of the data, because I do believe State Board liked it that way too. Ms. Board liked the data that way. But you'll also have the data spreadsheets with the color coding to tell you if they met growth, exceeded, or did not meet. That part won't change.
Dr. Cooper, can you give the CSAB a quick overview of how your virtual visits are going?
Absolutely. It's really going well. We set up all the dates. We set up calendar dates, sent the link to all of the schools that still have to do their renewal visit. And yes, we are packing in all of these visits into September to be prepared for October. But everyone gets the link, and the administrator of the school lets the parent or the staff or the board know what time they need to go to that particular link. It just runs all day, and it has worked beautifully. I think that, you still want to go to schools and you want to meet kids, because that's the fun part, but it has truly been a successful go at virtual site visits. The schools have worked really hard. I don't know if you all had a chance to see the scoop, but they have been really creative, came with some great ideas of how to do virtual walkthroughs of their school. But those examples are in there for anyone to see, but it's going very well. Yeah.
Dr. Cooper, this is Cheryl. Can we also get current enrollment numbers on these schools with the report?
Yes, ma'am. That'll be included on the spreadsheet like last year. So what will be in that spreadsheet, you'll have the school of course, the name and number. You also have any compliance things that were pending against the school. You have the financials. Of course, FBS is going to do their own report in November after the audits come in, but I'll add that data to the sheet for you. And you'll also know what their enrollment is, and it will indicate if they've had a slide. But we have to know with COVID, some of the numbers could have changed due to what option they chose, B or C. So all of that is in conversation. Schools, some of the schools are a little bit, you know, they want to make sure that we understand that COVID has had an effect on enrollment. And in some ways, it's made their enrollment higher. But yes, enrollment will be included as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions?
Cooper, when you do your presentation, could you share one of your virtual interviews or whatever you call them? Could you share with us?
Absolutely. I'll make it a point to record one so that, I mean, because using WebEx, you have the option to record and it gives you the transcript right away. So I can do that. I just make sure I ask permission of the school if they're okay with being, you know, recorded. But it's a really cool process. So yes, ma'am.
Don't record Alex.
Okay, or Bruce.
Or Bruce.
Well, Bruce has already had his. We beat COVID out for Bruce, right? So he doesn't have to have a virtual. But okay, I'll make sure to do that. Anything else that you all can think of that you want in the spreadsheet? And if you want, I can send out the spreadsheet again that I used last year or put together last year, and you can add whatever feedback, anything extra that you think you want in there to kind of give you an idea of what you had last year. So, totally up to you.
Shonda, this is Jeanette Butterworth. I'm just curious when we would expect to receive that so we can start looking through it.
I can send it out to you today.
I'm talking about the one for this year.
Oh, okay. So the one for this year will be ready at the top of October.
Okay.
It'll be ready at least a week before the report is going to be given. But I like to go ahead and send all the information out to the schools before ever posting it or making it a public document or sending it out, just in case, because they like to be able to check and balance, make sure everything is okay on their end. But yeah, at least a week before, and maybe even earlier since we don't have to wait on data, but I have to have one more compliance check-in before I can solidify the compliance for each of these schools to make sure there's nothing pending that has come up as of late.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Shonda.
You're welcome. Okay. But that's all I have for you. As always, if you have any questions, call me, email me, and I'll be sure to get back to you.
All right, thanks, Coop.
You're welcome. Thanks, yeah.
Okay, at this time, we are going to hear from North Carolina Cyber Academy and have an update on the status of their program. And I'm going to ask if we have Mr. Hill available, and gonna request that we do this briefly. So try with some hope to stay on schedule here.
Yes, sir. Hi.
All your information, board members.
Mr. Chair and board members, good morning. This is Martez Hill, the superintendent for the North Carolina Cyber Academy. This morning, I have Dr. Shirley Arrington, the vice president of the board, and Mr. Bo Mullins, the chief operations officer. I would like to recognize Dr. Arrington and then immediately move to Mr. Bo Mullins' update. Dr. Arrington, please.
Good morning. I'm so pleased to be with you this morning. I am completing my first year as a member of the North Carolina Cyber Academy. I am a retired educator. I retired from the University of North Carolina, where I served as executive director for the Model Teacher Education Consortium. And prior to that, I served as assistant director with the Principal's Executive Program. I'm on the board. I'm currently serving as the chair of the Academic Excellence Committee, wherein I am working with the schools to bring forth quality school improvement plans. I look forward to our success, and I'm very, very excited about the progress that we're making. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Mullins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Just wanted to update the charter school board on enrollment and a few other things. I think when I sent the enrollment data, we were at 2450. As of this morning, we're at 2472. And we've reached out to our enrollment team, and we've got about 3,000 students on the wait list. So we're pulling right now, trying to pull about 550 this week from our wait list. We're looking at pulling 4th grade, 6th grade, and 9 through 12 to get us, obviously at cap, and then the additional 1,000 students. So over the next 2 weeks, we're pushing hard to pull as many kids from our wait list as possible. And we would already be over cap, but if you've seen the withdrawal data, we've had about 156 kids to withdraw since the school year started. And most of those are kids that simply just went back to brick and mortar. I think they were on our wait list. They enrolled with us, and then once brick and mortar decided the different brick and mortar plans that are out there, once those decisions were made, we lost some students to brick and mortar. But right now we're at 2472. We anticipate being at our 2592 this week, and then we've reached out again to about 550 additional students to move them from our wait list to the enrollment queue. And we've ordered computers, about 1,400 computers. Part of those have come in, and they're coming in waves. As you can imagine, everybody's needing a laptop. So we're trying to stay ahead of that as well. And we're finalizing our audit. We received word this morning that we would have our audit results this week, and our transition with our financial services, that transition has gone well. So if there's any questions the board would have or Mr. Hill would have, be happy to try to answer them.
I have a question. Has DPI given you any indication about how they'll handle, students that have been enrolled now for 20 days at a school? Generally the funding remains at that school. So how will that be handled? Will you receive funding, or what is that? Partial funding? Just county money? Have they given you any indication about that?
Not on now. They might have given Mr. Hill some indications, but obviously we'll work with our financial team, Acadia, and be in contact with our withdrawals, as they'll handle the local billing and those things for us. So we'll be in contact with our financial services and DPI to see how that's going to be handled.
And no, sir, Mr. Quigley, we haven't received any additional guidance on that specific question.
So it seems like it would just be the same as it was before if you're pulling a student off the wait list after the day 20.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I don't have any other questions. Anyone else?
Alex, I just had a quick question. For the students who are coming in that are in high school, they're well beyond the 10, 20 days. I know that rule's been extended for this year. How are those students being treated? Are they being dropped into the semester already in progress? Or are they being rolled in with a different start date?
They're being dropped in already in progress coming from the brick and mortar, and then we'll provide as many resources as we can if they need to get caught up. As you know, we use the Edgenuity, the curriculum there, the learning management system. So obviously our principals and teachers will be on top of kids that need additional support, and we've hired some coordinators at our middle school and high school to help with transition of kids that are coming from brick and mortar, and they may be behind. So we'll be working to try to get them caught up. We are looking at September 30th not taking any additional students because of that concern. We would already be just over a month into the school year, and last year we enrolled students throughout the entire school year, and that just was not the best practice, bringing in kids and having them starting so far behind. So our goal is to get everybody in by September 30th and then provide the extra help that those kids would need to get caught up. Working with our social work.
Question.
Go ahead, Joel.
Thank you. There's a discrepancy, and maybe it's on my end, between what I'm hearing and what the reports have been stated as it relates to enrollment and the wait list. Can either staff or the presenter tell me why there's such a gap in the data that was reported versus what is being told to us?
Okay, so the information I sent, the enrollment was 2450, and since that report was sent in, we've enrolled 22 additional students, and then the wait list is still close to 3,000 students, and I think that's what I had sent in. I'm not sure, Mr. Ford, the discrepancies. I try to explain it. If you can be specific, I want to give you the right information.
Okay, I just didn't, and maybe I'm looking at the wrong report, Mr. Chairman, but am I not looking at a total enrollment of 2534 and a wait list of 2571?
I believe that's right. The school would have to verify that.
Okay, and so if there's a lag time or something, that's fine. I just heard some larger numbers, and it concerned me versus what is being reported. And I know we have citizens, parents and others who are interested in this data, and I just want to make sure that we are being diligent to line up with what you're telling us versus what was reported. That's all.
Okay, and so the reporting, Mr. Ford, that you're talking about is the information we sent through the Charter School Board, because those are different than the numbers that I submitted.
Yes.
Okay. The numbers this morning are 2472 in enrollment and about 3,000 students on the wait list.
Okay.
And Mr. Mullins, you're saying by September 30th, you want to utilize the extension, I guess, expansion that you guys were afforded and enroll 1,000 more students by that deadline?
Yes, we're working with our enrollment to try to finalize everything by September 30th. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions at this time for any of the representatives of Cyber Academy?
Mr. Chair, he says about 3,000 on the wait list. Is there an exact number?
Well, it was 3,000 exactly when the report was sent to Charter School Advisory Board. But the reason I'm saying about 3,000 because we pulled over 500 of those students from the wait list, and so that's I hate to say a moving target, but we're pulling kids from the wait list every day. So since the board received this report, we have tried to pull 550 students from this wait list. And I don't have from the enrollment team this morning how many of those 550 have been archived because they're not coming, and how many have started the enrollment documents. but we're receiving kids daily to be added to the wait list, and we're taking away from the wait list daily as well. So tomorrow that number could be 2,911, or it could be 2,600, because we're pulling from that list daily and we're adding to the list daily as well.
Thank you. And Alice, this was Parlay.
I have a question regarding the budget for Mr. Hill.
And that's Rita.
Sorry, Rita Hare. Just your year end. When is the fiscal year end for the Cyber Academy?
It ends on June 30th. It's the same fiscal year as the state fiscal year.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right. Any further questions? Okay, thank you, Cyber Academy. At this time, we'll move on to the access timeline and next steps.
All right, thank you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. This is Jay Whalen with the North Carolina Access Program. We have just a couple of brief updates, and then we'll move on to the application timeline and application materials and rubric for approval. So just a couple general updates really quickly. We've welcomed 2 new team members to the Access team. Davita Robinson is our new subgrant program manager, and Lakeisha Robbins is our new finance administrator. We are very excited to have them on board, and hopefully you'll get a chance to meet them in the near future. As a reminder, this board and the state board awarded 34 schools with Access subgrants in cycle 2 that totaled $17.4 million. One of those schools, Brevard Academy, has decided to decline their award. So cycle 2, the total is now 33 schools and $16.8 million. So to date, 42 schools have received subgrants totaling $20.2 million. We're finishing up our planning and budget meetings with all subgrantees and working with DPI to make allotments so we can begin the reimbursement process for this year. We are expecting potentially a couple of replication applications from schools that applied to you all this summer for replication charters. And so the deadline for those Access subgrant replications is October 1st. The fellowship kicked off with 83 fellows in August and is off to a great start. So we're super excited about that. Thanks again to Chairman Quigley for his words and participating as a speaker. If anyone else is interested in joining any of those sessions, we'll be happy to send out invitations and connection details. Our next session is this coming Thursday with the Educational Equity Institute. And then 2 weeks ago, we presented to the State Board of Education some of the ways that the Access program is addressing equity in schools. And we had some great school leaders from our first cohort present as well. And so I think that presentation went really well, and hopefully we'll be able to do more of those things for this board as well. I know the agendas get filled up pretty quickly, but maybe after the application cycle, we'll be able to have some school leaders in to talk to this group as well. So one exciting thing we're launching, or actually launched last Thursday, is the Aspiring Minority School Leaders Program. And so this was sort of born out of a conversation that this board had earlier this summer. The Access program has created the opportunity open to all charter schools, not just subgrantee or Access schools, to recruit, train, and support 20 aspiring leaders of color in North Carolina charter schools. So current school leaders can nominate aspiring leaders of color within their buildings, and then selected candidates will complete a fellowship-style experience with the Access program and coursework in partnership with Appalachian State University to receive a North Carolina administrator's license. And so the program with Appalachian State is completely virtual, and the Access program has committed to paying the tuition costs for those 20 leaders to go through the 24-credit coursework certification process with Appalachian State. And so we shared the information packet and application packet with you all via e-board, so there's more information there, and there'll be much more to come about this program. We're very excited about what this can mean for the development of a leadership pipeline, particularly for leaders of color in North Carolina charter schools. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions. The last thing I'll turn to is the sub-grant application and timeline for approval. But if there's any questions before we get to that, I'd be happy to take those at this time.
Mr. Chairman, Joel Ford.
Go ahead, Joel.
Two questions. One for the presenter. Thank you very much for the succinct information. You mentioned in your report earlier about a declination. What was the reason for the declination of the grant?
So we didn't receive any specific reason, but a lot of it related to the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the challenges and issues that the school was facing for the beginning of the school year, and that the access program and commitments wasn't something at this time that they could commit to.
All right, thank you. Second question has to do with the minority leadership development program that you just mentioned. Has the charter school staff identified barriers or issues associated with minorities as it relates to leadership in charter schools? And if so, how are you tracking or measuring the effectiveness of the program?
So currently, the program is aligned to one of the state board's goals of increasing not only just the school leadership pipeline in North Carolina broadly, but the pipeline for leaders of color as well. And so I don't have specific data in front of me to know any percentages, but I know that part of the conversation over the summer between with this board was around sort of a lack of representation of leaders of color in North Carolina charter schools. And so the purpose of this program is, obviously we're happy to commit access funds and support this program. I think long-term, a larger question is how we would continue something like this to continue to build the pipeline and remove barriers for the certification piece within the leadership program. But our goal would be to, I think at some point, look at demographic data of what are current leadership trends within North Carolina charter schools and what the impact of this pipeline would be. I think part of the goal of the program is that the leaders that are nominated and accepted into this program are not only creating a pipeline to potentially take over their own school when the time comes, but to potentially be in a cohort of people that could be selected from for other schools that are looking for leaders or for new charter schools that people are looking to start in the near future. So in terms of longitudinal data, that is something that we'll look at for demographic trends moving forward. Obviously, a cohort of 20 that we can commit to is not extremely large, but our hope is that this is sort of just the beginning of the process to support a long-term pipeline of leaders of color.
Thank you. Last follow-up, Mr. Chairman. I understand broadly and generally the goal, the aspirational goal of the program. One of the things that I think it's incumbent upon us as a board is to understand whether or not the program is working. And so if we could get in the near future, and you can quantify that, Mr. Machado, about how do we measure the success or failure of a program such as this, because I think it's important for us to be able to measure and understand what we're looking to achieve and whether or not we achieved it.
Absolutely.
I think some initial, this is Alex and Joel, appreciate that, those thoughts. I think one metric we can look at is just what are the quality of those that get nominated, how many nominees meet the criteria and are accepted in the program. So given the number of slots, what percent are we able to fill? And then I think some plans to track following kind of post participation in the program, the rate, how many of those leaders what are the roles that they assume after the program? Do they stay in a classroom? Do they become an assistant principal, dean of students? Do they, how many years is it before they become a principal? Or things like that will be really interesting data for us to kind of look at and see what happens with the cohorts and where they end up over time. And I think that'll give us some valuable insight into how effective something like this is. And I think over the next couple of years, while we have the access funds, we can evaluate its effectiveness and then see if, okay, is this something really that we should continue. But want to agree with Jay in that part of this is how do we have a pipeline of leaders of color that are ready to take on the leadership because of new schools, particularly. We have a lot of folks that come before us that say, we're going to look for a principal. Well, the charter school experience is really unique, and this is a program that's somewhat tailored to that. Leadership is leadership, but the unique challenges of being a charter school leader, and excited to build that into the work of the Access program. Really grateful for Jay and also Barbara and Neil who just did a tremendous job putting this together, and heard from Dave. Haven't had a chance to listen to the state board meeting, but heard from Dave that there was a lot of great feedback on the program at the presentation at the most recent state board meeting. So appreciate all their work here. And I believe Bruce has a question for Jay as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Quigley, and thank you, Jay, and everyone for putting this program together. I guess I have a clarifying question, maybe, and I realize the criteria are probably already established, but I'm just wondering if you could share some of the thinking behind the eligibility that the person already hold a master's degree, as well as holding a teacher licensure, when charter schools, as we know, have a great amount of flexibility on that issue. So it just strikes me as that those are two eligibility requirements that I can think of wonderful candidates in my own school that wouldn't meet one or two of those. So just curious on the rationale behind those two criteria.
Yeah, and so that is sort of directly aligned to the Appalachian State eligibility criteria. And so in partnership with Appalachian State, to be able to go through the program to obtain the North Carolina School Administrator license, applicants are going to have to meet the university requirements to begin that program.
Okay.
And Bruce, this is Dave Machado. We have talked about that internally, and we're going to, because Dr. O'Neill and NC Access team did work closely with Appalachian State, and that was their requirement, we're going to look at this after we get the list of candidates to see, do we want to continue with this type of cohort? Do we want to go to a different cohort that we could still work with the university, but maybe either just held a master's degree? That's a great question. We have talked about that internally, and we wanted to start with some pretty high standards and to see how it was received. But your point's well taken, and we have discussed that internally.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dave. I'm sure others are in the same boat. I mean, I personalize it to myself. I got my master's degree so I could become a school administrator. I didn't have to have a master's degree so I could become a school administrator. I mean, it just seemed kind of like a pretty good bar.
Can I, this is Barbara O'Neill. Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
Okay, so this is the Appalachian State add-on program. So in order to just add on to your license, you need to have a master's degree plus teaching experience. So the other part of and this is only 24 hours, only 4 of these classes are actual in class and the rest of it is internship. So the purpose of this program is to already assume that we have some experienced educators coming in, just trying to add on to their license. 1 or 2 things. This program costs less than a master's degree. And 2, to go back to what Mr. Ford was saying, this is one of the barriers to minorities receiving an offer for a job, is having a master's degree and having a license. So we kind of set the bar high here. But if we go through a master's degree program, it would actually cost us a lot more money. That's all I have to say.
Appreciate that. And I think also, as Dave articulated, I think that we have some flexibility. So we're, again, getting back to Mr. Ford's point, what's the data? And we will be able to take a look at qualified applicants, what were the, nominees, percent of the nominees that were eligible, qualified, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're going to get some good information and learn and then make adjustments if we need to, moving forward. Thank you all for your work on this. This is exciting.
Great. And so the last thing that we have this morning is the updated timeline, application, and rubric for approval. This year, we're planning to have the updated request for application and rubric approved by the state board on November 5th. And so we would post that publicly and open the application window on November 13th. Letters of intent would again be due on January 15th, same date as last year. And applications would again be due on March 1st. So we're planning to provide several virtual training sessions starting in October, and we'll plan to bring recommendations to this board in May of 2021 for final approval by state board in July of 2021 for cohort 3 of subgrantees. In terms of the application, outside of minor grammatical and terminology updates, the only two significant updates are that we replaced 2 questions to better align with the goals of the program. So we replaced the question about the education, how the education plan compares to or differs with the LEA with the question about interventions, support services, and additional educational opportunities. And we replaced the question about the school calendar with the question about the assessment program and how data is used to increase student outcomes. And so subsequently, the rubric has been aligned, updated to align to those 2 new questions in the application. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about those 2. Otherwise, those are the only things that need your approval.
You have a motion?
Heather Buncannon, so moved.
Any other parlay seconds?
Properly moved in second to approve the proposed application timeline with appropriate revisions. Any discussion? Okay, I believe we could probably do a voice vote for this. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Okay. All right, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Whalen.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving along. Ms. Carroll?
Yes, 3 Rivers is up next, and I believe Mr. McQueen should be on the line. Mr. McQueen, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, great.
Great,
If you could give us an update on the facility and how things are going with 3 Rivers, that would be great.
Yes, today I'm here on site as we have been for the last few weeks, and the inspector just left about 30 minutes ago, giving us the final approval for the education certificate of occupancy. And he's said he'll have it later today or this morning, or he'll write it up and send it over to us. Either we'll pick it up or he'll email it, which he's done in the past. I want to thank Chris Surgeon. He's the only inspector in the entire county, and he has to do a lot, and he really bent over backwards to help us to get this done. I want to thank him.
Alex, I have a question.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Sure.
Mr. McQueen, when are you actually going to start school?
Well, as soon as we officially get the certificate in hand, which should be today. I think we had it on our schedule for today, and if we don't have it, then we can't officially start. So it'll be tomorrow or as soon as we can.
How are you adjusting your calendar to account for the fact that you're starting a month late?
Well, we are making changes in time off, extending the school day, looking at trying to achieve that within the hours as well as the days in order to accomplish what we hope will be a complete a school year. Of course, all this unknown. And so that's how we're making that happen. And we're meeting with the board to make all those final considerations.
Could you supply us with your new calendar and your schedule, day, you know, how long your days are once you've done that?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alex, I have a question for Mr. McQueen.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Mr. McQueen, what has been the conversation, the communication between Three Rivers and the parents of these students for the past month? How have you been?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. How have you been in contact with them as far as, you know, this was our start date, no, this is our start date, now, you know, once again, it's moved?
Yes, ma'am. So we have traditionally for the last now nearly 20 years always had something called educational enrichment, a time period or week that generally precedes whenever the county starts. And so we've been kind of in that mode with our students and parents. And so the look, feel, taste, texture, everything has just been like actual school. And so, particularly in these COVID times, we have to be creative, and so we've kind of just had to extend that time. And the parents have been very cooperative and very supportive and rolled right along with us. So it's very smooth. There's no change for parents in the way we have been conducting our sessions with students.
And what about your faculty and staff? So basically they've been working for free?
Ma'am?
I said your faculty and staff, they've been working for free?
Oh, absolutely not. No, ma'am. We've made all of our payrolls, made all of all the expenditures that are necessary to operate the school just like it normally would.
Okay, so that's been provided through Torchlight?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Through the management company, yes.
Okay, because Three Rivers has not been able to draw down any funds yet.
Yes,
for
I
this year,
understand.
correct?
Oh,
Okay.
yes, ma'am. That's exactly right. Mm-hmm.
This is Rita Hare. Mr. McQueen, what does modified Plan B look like at Three Rivers?
That is kind of outside of my wheelhouse. My wife handles all of those items, and my concentration has been so heavily on this, but I could certainly get it back to you later today.
Okay, that would be good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. McQueen at this time?
Alex, I guess my question is, do we need to take any action as far as the calendar, or what do we need to do as the board?
I think that if Ashley could, sorry. I just want to make sure people, if Ashley could send us the CO once it's available, and also the modified calendar and current enrollment, Mr. McQueen, have you seen attrition as a result of the kind of transition period here and not opening school on time?
No, not really. We were up to probably 130 or so at one time. So it's kind of tapered off, but we kind of expect that. Maybe it was around 120 in real numbers. So that's been about it. Yes, sir.
This is Jeanette Butterworth. I'm sorry I was muted and had a question a minute ago, and I apologize if y'all have already asked this, but I just want to confirm that the 109 students that are in your current enrollment numbers, are all of those participating in the enrichment days?
Absolutely. We are on the call every day. Our principals are monitoring. Yes, all of those students are participating in the enrichment days. Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you.
Referring, of those 109, I know you realize you said it not. Is it an expectation that whatever your plan B does look like, that all 109 are reporting to a campus, or would you be breaking them up? I'm just curious about that.
I'm sorry, I missed most of your question. Could you repeat it for me, please?
Well, all 100, when you reopen on Plan B, where the students are actually physically coming to the campus, perhaps I guess tomorrow, you say, are all 109 of those students coming?
Boy, I would hope so, but I doubt it very seriously. I really am hearing from parents about their major concerns. Even though they want to see students back in school, they are very concerned about the health risk. And so we've been working with a Dr. Cook, who's developed a 15-minute response COVID test, and been training our staff and folks here and testing staff and other members of the community in order to see if we can increase the number of students that can return. So we are putting together a pretty significant detailed plan of action so that we can get our students back in the building as early as possible. And we believe with the space of our classes and the size of our campus and the number of students that we're serving, we should be able to do that safely.
Other questions from Mr. McQueen? I think we'd like to just get another update in October. So if we could go ahead and get that scheduled, Ms. Baccaro and Mr. McQueen, and I think that would be beneficial.
Yes, sir.
I will put that on the agenda.
All right. Any other questions at this point? All right, great. Thank you, Mr. McQueen, and we'll see you in October. Best of luck. Get started.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
All right. At this time, we're ready to hear from Claire Porter on opening school.
Good morning, Chair Quigley and members of the Charter School Advisory Board. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes.
All right. Here just to share for informational purposes the last enrollment update for our 2020 schools. As you'll recall, 2 of our schools in the original list did not proceed. Kaleidoscope, who was not recommended to proceed with the RTO process, and Elaine Riddick, who is presently in a delay year. That leaves us with 7 schools who opened their doors in either Plan B or Plan C recently. So you can see there the updated enrollment and facility numbers. It's always hard to open a charter school, and this year with the pandemic, we've had certainly additional challenges. Many schools had challenges getting their permanent facilities ready on time, and therefore did rely heavily on their fallback plans. And that's, if you look over to the updated notes section, you'll see which of our schools are actually in their permanent facility or in a temporary facility. So the good news is that a very high number of the schools are at or exceeding their capacity, with one exception, that exception being, let me see, 73%. I believe that's Elements Community School, and that is understandable, again, with parents opting for homeschooling and other different options that are out there. So in terms of facilities, again, 2 of the schools, actually it's 3 as of this morning, are in their permanent facility. That would be Achievement, Cardinal Charter, and MENA. And the 4 remaining are, again, working towards permanent educational certificates of occupancy, but all are in temporary locations with temporary ECOs. Wilmington School for the Arts will remain in its contingency or temp location, which will become its permanent location this year. It discovered very late in the game that the selected perm location could not be zoned correctly. So I won't read them all off to you, but you can see they're all at capacity, and this again is just based on their original projected year 1 or their year 1 amended. And that's all I have, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Board members, any questions?
I'm sorry. This is Lynn Kroger. I had a question regarding the enrollment. Do you know how many of these schools are actually 100% remote and how many are hybrid?
Thank you for that question. I actually emailed them, and I did have a response this morning from 3 of those schools. I will provide an update to CSAB on all of them. Revolution is Plan B, Achievement is Plan B, and MENA is Plan C. And that's what I've heard of, and I'll provide a complete list later today. May I answer any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Claire, this is Sherry. Do we have any updates on Wilmington School of the Arts other than their facility? I think they've had some turnover. Do we know what's going on with that?
Yes, ma'am. They do have a new school leader, Susan Hogan, and Mr. Machado and I have been in touch with her, supporting her transition there. I do understand that Lily Nicole, the board chair, has stepped down from her role, and John Westberg, the leader, also has stepped down. I don't know, other than what has been shared with me regarding the zoning for the permanent mistake that was made there, but I will share with CSAB whatever I do find out. But it is our intent to support Ms. Hogan as she transitions over. She does have significant experience as a public school administrator, but as we stated earlier in this meeting, operating a charter school is a whole nother thing. So we'll continue to support Wilmington.
Thankfully, it's very small this year.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions, CSAB members?
Other questions, folks?
I would say these are pretty good stats given what we're dealing with this year.
Yeah, this is exciting. Good. It's good to have a bit of good news here. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We are ready now for the virtual charter pilot report.
All right. Good morning, everyone. This is Ashley Beccaro with the Office of Charter Schools. I'm going to present the 2020 report on the virtual public charter school program. Let's see. So we will look at the background of the program, student enrollment and withdrawals, course offerings, student performance, implementation, administration, and funding. And then finally, we will get to recommendations. And I'll talk a little bit about, in just a second, how I've organized this and why. So in 2014, the General Assembly established a pilot program to authorize the operation of 2 virtual charter schools. Those 2 schools, at the time, it was North Carolina Connections Academy, which we now know as North Carolina Cyber Academy, and North Carolina Virtual Academy. They began operating in the 2015 school year. The original legislation slated the program for a total of 4 years, so it would have ended in 2018 school year. But previous to that termination, the General Assembly extended it. And so now both schools are in their 6th year of operation, and they have 2 additional years after this, based on the current legislation, which would end the pilot program in the 2022 school year. As part of the initial legislation, the General Assembly had specific reporting requirements. Those were amended given the extension, and so this report is a requirement through the General Assembly to report on the first 5 years of operation. In 2 years, there will be another report, and that will be just previous to the end of the pilot program. The report includes specific requirements, which is really how I've organized this report in order to stay close to what the General Assembly has requested. So as I mentioned earlier, we have North Carolina Connections, which is now cyber. They both began with EMOs. North Carolina Connections Academy was affiliated with Pearson OBL. And as some of you on the board recall, in May 2019, there was a rather lengthy amendment process. And eventually the state board did approve the separation of Pearson and Connections Academy. And that is when the school changed its name to Cyber Academy. So in some of the data or history that you may find on the schools, you often see North Carolina Connections Academy, and that is why. The pilot legislation does have some specifics that are really relevant only to the virtual charter schools, but in general, the virtual charter schools are subject to the normal Article 14A legislation and statutes that are that pertain to brick and mortar charter schools, especially as we'll talk about a little bit later in terms of student accountability and enrollment and those sort of things. So moving to student enrollment, well, before I get to enrollment, does anyone have any questions on the legislation or the beginning of the pilot program? Okay. So student enrollment, the original legislation capped enrollment at 2,592 students. The legislation did allow the state board to waive that threshold beginning with the 2018 school year. And so there have been 2 previous enrollment approvals through the state board. Those pertain to virtual academy. One was in the 2019 year, and they were allowed to grow by 20%. And then just recently, the state board did approve virtual academy to maintain its enrollment, which was a little bit under 3,000 students, but added a stipulation that following this school year, any further enrollment requests above the maximum would be subject to the school meeting academic growth. However, not only, I think maybe a week ago, the General Assembly passed another session law, and within that COVID bill was a virtual charter school enrollment section. So as you can see here, the General Assembly has allowed the schools to increase. Cyber can increase up to 1,000 students, and virtual can increase up to 2,800 students. This is specifically for this school year, and there is also a provision in here that states that those schools shall give enrollment priority for the upcoming school year for those students that came into the school under this legislation. So this was, as you recall, a discussion that we had a few months ago. The state board had declined the expanded enrollment, but they are now allowed to expand due to this legislation. And I did reach out to the schools. As you heard this morning, Cyber Academy does plan to expand its enrollment. And last night, the head of Virtual Academy let me know that the board was meeting to discuss and vote on the matter. So I haven't heard an update yet, but they may be expanding. All right, so North Carolina Cyber, they began the program with 1,353 students, and the final enrollment figures we had from the previous school year, as you know, they've increased a bit, but the previous ones we had were 2,253, which is an enrollment increase of 66.5%. So obviously there's been quite a bit of enrollment increase. And then we'll look at withdrawal data in just a minute, which is quite different for virtual academies. And they have really varied, with a low of 507 to a high of 719. This just shows you a little bit more of a visual of what the enrollment and withdrawals looks like. Obviously, as the year progresses for each school year, the withdrawals, the cumulative withdrawals also increase. And the last data we're looking at is from the previous school year. So we will, once we figure out how much they're going to expand enrollment, we can always give you an update on that. Now for virtual, they have also had a similar increase, a bit higher. So their enrollment increase is nearly 90% since the beginning of the pilot. And similar to Cyber Academy, they've had a variation in withdrawals ranging from a low of 586 to a high of 650 withdrawals. And those are cumulative over a given school year. And again, this is just kind of a graphic for you to see the enrollment increases over time and the fluctuation in withdrawals. Now, unique to the virtual charter schools is legislation regarding the withdrawal rates. And the original legislation required a withdrawal rate below 25%. That is still in effect. They are still asked to meet that withdrawal rate. But there have been some changes. So when the program initially started, the only exception in calculating their withdrawal rate was a student that was considered a finite enrollee. So if a student enrolled and said, I'm only going to be here for 2 months, or something like that, they could mark that student as a finite enrollment, and then that would not be calculated in the withdrawal rate. However, there was another change in session law in 2016, which added 4 more exclusions. So now there are 5 exclusions for calculating withdrawal rates. The finite enrollees, those who fail to participate, which is often called an administrative withdrawal. Those no longer qualified to attend, perhaps they moved to Georgia or another state. Those who withdraw because of family, personal, or medical reasons. And then those who withdraw from school within the first 30 days. From my review of some of the data I saw, it appears that the fourth one, withdrawing within the first 30 days, appears to be the majority of those that they have. But again, it's up to the schools to keep up with this data. So looking at North Carolina Cyber, there's a lot of information here, and I apologize. But if you look at the bottom, you can kind of see where it's highlighted. These are the withdrawal rates when you take out the finite enrollees and those exempted withdrawals. So once the legislation changed and became in effect the 2016 year, you can see that Cyber was able to easily stay under the 25%. And they even did that with all enrollees for the previous 3 years. I think I may have saw a chat pop up. Are there any questions about withdrawal rates?
Ashley, how are the finite enrollees counted for funding? I assume since it's finite and they're not going to be there the whole year, they wouldn't be funded. Do you know?
That's a good question. I don't know. I would not think that it actually, impacts the funding, because the only reason I think that is because the finite enrollees are actually something that DPI itself does not calculate. The school has to tag that enrollee. So it might, there might be something that I don't know on the funding side. But for example, if you look at this information, the NC Cyber, they did not have finite enrollee data for 3 of their years. So it's something that the school has to keep basically record of. And there's varying amounts of, I guess, record keeping that was seen when we look into the data. That's a good question, though. I'll definitely reach out to FBS about that and see if they have any more information about that.
You.
So virtual, you can see, so Virtual Academy, they do have more detailed records on their finite enrollees. And so you can see here that they have a much larger population of finite enrollees than we saw with Cyber Academy, which they also have higher levels of the exempted withdrawals, which makes their withdrawal rates quite small. And you can see those highlighted at the bottom here. The General Assembly asks for details about course offerings, and you will see in the report that accompanies this, there I gave details about that. But I think the overall gist of it is that both of the schools have a very large variety of course offerings, and over the years of the pilot, they have really improved those course offerings. There's a large variety of AP and honors courses, there are occupational course of studies, and then there are also very varied elective offerings. Both schools, I asked them to, provide the course offerings and to also kind of inform me of how those course offerings have changed over the years. And really, I think it's in response to student demand and interest, which also I'm sure helps with the retention rates and keeping students enrolled. But you can see in the report a full listing of those course offerings. So when we get into student performance and accountability, it's important to understand that the virtual schools, although they are a very unique model, they are still subject to the state accountability. So there is the academic growth, which we all know you can either exceed, meet, or did not meet. And then the school performance grades, which range from an A to an F. And starting in 2018, accountability also provides scores for subgroups. But there's a specific minimum number of scores needed for certain data, and so we don't always have subgroup data, and we'll look at that in a second. As part of the charter school statutes, there are low performing and continually low performing designations. Low performing is D or an F performance grade, and then met or not met. And then continually low performing are those designated as low performing for at least 2 of the 3 consecutive years. So when we look at the 2 virtual schools, unfortunately, they are both considered continually low performing. And we'll dig into the specifics in just a second. So this is North Carolina Cyber. You can see here and this is the same for virtual. Actually, they both have performance grades of Ds throughout the period of the pilot, and then also growth status of not met. If we look at the growth index, North Carolina Cyber made some significant improvements the second year of the pilot program, and then has struggled with their growth scores the previous 2 years. And obviously this last year we did not have data available, unfortunately. Now, if we look at Cyber's grade level proficiency and college and career readiness, we pull these. This is often data that is used when you look at renewals, and obviously it's part of the state accountability system. So you can see here that for grade level proficiency, it's really stayed quite stable within between 51% and 46 between the 2 years. A little bit of deviation, but not quite significant. But compared to the state, you can see that they are underachieving when you compare to the state. That is also the same for career and college, or college and career readiness. Now turning to virtual, as I stated before, they also have the same performance grade and growth status. Their growth index is a bit better than cyber. So just like cyber, they had very similar growth rates the first year of the pilot, with both of them in the negative 16% range. And then Virtual Academy has shown some significant improvement since that time. A little bit of variance in these last 3 years, but improvement for sure over the negative 16.36. This is Virtual's grade level proficiency in career and college readiness. So you can see here, again, it's trailing the state averages in both grade level proficiency and career or college and career readiness. If we look at an overview of both the schools, the blue bars are Cyber Academy, and then the orange bars are Virtual Academy. And this is for GLP and college and career readiness. So although Virtual Academy has seen a bit better growth in their overall growth, they have been a bit below Cyber Academy for GLP and CCR. This is the subgroup data. So as I stated, we only have 2 years of data. Subgroup data began to be reported with the 2018 ESSA plan. So I have shaded any area that would meet state standards, meaning being a C or above, here on the chart. So you can see that they've had some success with the Asian subgroup, and then also with the white subgroup for school performance grade, but neither or no subgroup has met growth. For Virtual Academy, they've had a bit more success with some of the subgroups. Again, the Asian subgroup, the Hispanic subgroup, 2 or more races, and then students with disabilities. And they've been able to show some growth for these subgroups, as opposed to cyber, which has struggled a little bit with that. Both of the schools were, I did work with the schools to, obviously keep them informed of the report and the data that I was gathering. Both schools have the opportunity to write a response to the report. North Carolina Virtual did submit one yesterday, and so she, in that letter, she did point out some areas of improvement that they're seeing with their own internal data. So I think that's worth noting, but of course I'm sticking to the state data that we usually use for accountability purposes. And then I'm sure cyber will probably turn in a response as well prior to this report going to the state board. One more area for performance, and this is looking at graduation rates. So you can see the state averages, North Carolina Cyber and North Carolina Virtual here at the bottom. North Carolina Virtual has made some significant progress in graduation rates. This is also, what you see here is very aligned with what we see nationally for virtual charter schools. The national average in the 2017 school year, which is the latest data I could find, was 84% graduation rate, and for virtual charters, it was just under 50%. Before I move on to the administration, are there any questions regarding academics?
Ashley, I know we've had this discussion in the past, and I don't know if you could confirm that in order to be counted in the testing numbers, a student has to be enrolled something like 140 days of the school year because of the high turnover in the virtuals. What percentage of students out of the total actually tested, and how does that compare to traditional schools? Is it a much lower number that get tested because of the fact that they have higher turnover? Or was that an issue in this report?
I believe I can pull that data. I don't have that with me right now. I do know that in North Carolina Virtual's response, they had spoken a bit about their high participation rates. So I don't know. I don't think that it's I don't think they have chronically low participation rates, but I could definitely look into that.
Yeah, I recall that conversation a year or two ago, and I was surprised too that their participation rates did seem high, but I'm just curious how they compare to schools that don't have as much turnover, if it's a significant difference in percentages.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely pull that data. Okay, so moving on a little bit to the administration of the programs and to demographics. The legislation requires 100% of the virtual charter teachers to be certified in their area. It also has some other requirements, such as requiring professional development on virtual teaching. These numbers come from the authoritative source here at DPI, which is our licensure. I believe it's now called the Educator Recruitment and Effectiveness Division. But what they do is they merge payroll records with licensure database, and that's how they come up with these numbers. So Virtual Academy obviously has not had any issues. Cyber Academy, there's been some variation, and then you can see against the average of all charters. If we look at student demographics, the report gives you student demographics over the years, and although it's stayed rather steady, the schools are coming closer to mirroring what we see in the all charters and all traditional public schools. When they first began the pilot, there was a larger discrepancy, but as you can see now, they're fairly consistent. So this is the economically disadvantaged data. This is also pulled from a DPI authoritative source, which is the CEDARS program, and this is the same data that will be sent to the federal government for those accountability purposes. As you know, this has been a very big conversation among CSAB, among charter school stakeholders, and Virtual Academy did reach out to me and let me know that they believe their numbers are much higher. However, I used the numbers that I had from the authoritative source, and these are based on what we have through either the National School Lunch Program, the CEP program, or through direct certification. Students with disabilities, as you can see here, both virtual schools enroll a larger percentage than all charters and all traditional publics. And as you saw earlier with the demographic data, or with the subgroup data, Virtual Academy has had some success with those students, especially in the growth area. So that is good to see. As far as funding, there are three major differences in funding for virtual charter schools. So they are funded on ADM, but they exclude the per pupil share of low wealth and small county. When traditional charters are funded on first month ADM, virtual charter schools are funded based on month 1 and month 5 membership last day. And then the virtual charters have a $790 cap on their per pupil share of the current expense for that LEA. So if we look at the state funding over the year, there's a lot more data in the report, but just as an overall synopsis, you can see that both of the schools, for the most part, have about doubled, perhaps in the case of virtual, have more than doubled the state funding, and this is obviously in tune with the fact that their enrollment has grown significantly. Both now are funded at about 14, I guess a little bit over 14 million for cyber and over 16 million for virtual. All right, so the legislation and the reporting requirements that go to the General Assembly require recommendations. And those recommendations are asked to be to focus on things such as the expansion, the modification, and the continuation of the virtual program. As we know, there are 3 more years of the pilot program given the extension. So what I focused on in proposing some recommendations was really improvement over these next 3 years before any decisions are made about going past the pilot program and what happens to those schools at that point. And therefore I focused on academic improvement, accountability, and data. Once I present these are all obviously completely at your discretion. We can change them, we can modify them. If we have any other ideas, I can merge those into the report, and then those will go to State Board at its October meeting. So the first one regards the fact that we do not have data for this previous school year due to the state testing waiver. And in reading a lot of the research on virtual charters, what you see time and time again is that there just is not good research and there's not good data on these schools, which I think a lot of schools are probably understanding now, given how hard virtual instruction can be. And now that much of the country has been forced into a position of doing some type of virtual learning. So the first recommendation would be that both of the schools submit a report basically providing their own academic data for this previous school year. And that would give us something to at least lean on a little bit in light of the fact that we do not have state accountability data. You will see in the response that Virtual submitted, they have already provided some of their internal data. And so I'm sure that the schools have it available, and it would be something for us to be able to look at when we look at the long-term trends of the school. How would you like, Mr. Chair, would you like me to go through all of the recommendations first and then you guys can discuss them, or would you like to discuss them one at a time? What would be your pleasure? Does anybody have a preference?
Actually, this is Sherry. I say just go through them and then we can discuss.
Okay, great. The second possibility is considering reducing the legislatively mandated student to teacher ratios. So currently K through 8 is 1:50 and 9 through 12 is 1:150. You will also see in the response from Virtual Academy that they have reduced their ratios in certain areas, and it sounds like perhaps that is helping with some of the success they are seeing. There's not a lot of hard data on whether this would be successful or not, but there are kind of considerations and research that suggests that this could be effective in reducing, by reducing these student-teacher ratios, giving students a little bit more support that they may need in this virtual environment. The third recommendation is that during the next school year, so the 2021 to 22 school year, that both of the schools submit a report to CSAB and State Board regarding the student experience at each school. So something that I saw time and time again in the research is that there's a very sincere lack of information regarding what exactly is a student doing when they're enrolled full-time virtually. And sometimes it's, we hear presentations and we can get information, but sometimes it's difficult to get a really good grasp of what is happening daily. And that, that could be hampering effects to improve the student experience and the student data that we're seeing in terms of academic success. So this would just give us a better understanding of what exactly is the instructional model, what kind of curriculum and software is being used over time. I know at least one of the schools has changed this significantly. What kind of supports are families provided, those sort of things. And that would be, again, focusing on the student experience to get a better understanding of it. The next recommendation is regarding how accountability data is reported. So the 2 virtual schools are usually lumped together with all charters. And this would be a recommendation that they are actually separated from all charters for their own reporting reasons. And this is just based on the fact that virtual charters were established and extended through a process that is different than what we normally use for authorization and renewals of our brick and mortar charter schools. They, as we've seen recently with enrollment, the General Assembly often changes session law to change requirements for the 2 schools. And then virtual charter schools are just critically different from face-to-face instructional charter schools. And some would argue that they merit separate data analysis and consideration. And then finally, the last one is that, again, during the 2021 school year, that both of the virtual charter schools conduct in-depth surveys. This took place, I believe, the first year of the pilot, and it was included in the first report that went out in 2016. And this information, I think, would be really helpful in trying to come up with recommendations for the report that will be due in 2 years, and give some good feedback and some good data for both the state board and for your board to think about, the program going forward. So those are the recommendations I have. If there are any questions, we do need, as a board, for you to discuss those recommendations, to make any modifications, and make a vote on it, so we can forward it to state board next month.
Ashley, I might have missed this, because you've given a very thorough overview. The things that NCBA had sent in that letter that's on eBoard, is any of that going to be added into the report, or is that going to be, that letter going to be put as an appendix to the report or anything like that?
Yes, it's going to be added as an appendix.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, good afternoon. Good morning. This is Joel Ford. I got a question.
Yes.
So, Ashley, thank you for your presentation and the data that you have been able to gather and to present to us. I'm a little frustrated, and not at you, but at the academic performance of virtual and cyber. And one of the things that I did not see, and I am real interested in, is the leadership and management of both of these programs. You didn't have any information on it, and I'm trying to figure out, how do we hold them accountable for the resources and the programs that they are managing and overseeing versus their results?
That's a very relevant question. There has been significant leadership change at Cyber Academy. I know there has been one leadership change at Virtual Academy. To be honest, I don't know that we know exactly, internally how they manage and lead, but that's something that we could definitely try to dig deeper into and get more information.
So this is where I am. I think as a board, we have to make sure that cyber and virtual know that their performance is not acceptable. Secondly, an improvement plan, in my opinion, needs to be provided by both of these programs for us to be able to better understand what they understand and how they plan on improving going forward. Absent of that, and again, Ashley, this is not directed at you, I think the recommendations that you have presented do very little to hold them accountable and to push them with a sense of urgency for student performance and improvement.
We could definitely add that to the recommendations. I know that as part of their low performing status, they are required by the state to have a school improvement plan. So that's something we could definitely request and merge into the report, and we could ask for also an updated report based on more current happenings at the school, especially given the most likely future and increases in enrollment.
Thank you for that. I would definitely like to see that included. That is a recommendation that I have that I would like to see included. And I'm not sure about any other board members, but again, I'm really looking at ways to, one, hold folks accountable, two, be transparent, but then three, measure these outcomes so that our students and families who have chosen these programs are getting the best that we can offer and making sure that the academic performance is up to an acceptable standard. What they are producing right now is not acceptable.
Ashley, this is Bruce Friend. Thank you, as Mr. Ford said, for all this information. There's a lot to digest here. I guess my question is this, and preface this, but as you may know, I've got a lot of experience with full-time and supplemental virtual schools across the country. And so there's a lot to digest here in terms of these recommendations. And so you need us to vote on these today, or is there time for us to kind of work on these recommendations a little bit? Because I could take all 5 of them, and I know myself personally would probably have some tweaks and edits to each of them. And I do agree with Mr. Ford in the fact that I think some of these recommendations won't necessarily lead to the improvement we want to see in the schools. I think that, anyways, you go on and on. I just question about timeline and process for giving you feedback on all of this.
Ashley, I can try to answer that question. I don't mean to interrupt you. We have to take this to the state board in their October meeting for discussion and then vote on it in November at the state board meeting, because this report is due to the General Assembly in November 15th. We could certainly, if it was a pleasure of the board, to have a special call meeting just to discuss this in a couple weeks if you like, but we do need to take it to the state board in the first week of October.
Okay. Well, I'll just throw out for my experience a couple of things. Recommendation number 2, actually, from my experience, reducing those numbers actually isn't what's going to produce greater results. And I know when you put in things like 140, 150 students per teacher, that sounds astronomical, but it's an apples and oranges comparison to a traditional brick and mortar. When I taught, and most teachers teach, you say student ratios are 25-1, 22-1, 30-1. So when you hear 150-1, you think, oh my gosh, that's insane. But that's actually how many students a teacher would have that they're responsible for at that given time, which if you did the same analysis in a traditional school, if I'm a high school teacher with 30 kids in my class, I teach 5 classes, well, there's my ratio, 150-1. So it's a little bit of semantics and how it's worded, but it's important semantics to understand that these are not the same define student to teacher ratios as we all think of in a traditional school. The last recommendation, number 5, I would agree with, but I think there's a key component to that. And I've seen this with other full-time virtual schools across the country. I think it's really important that basically that audit basically of all of this is done by an external stakeholder, that it's not self-report, but actually that the schools be required to hire someone to do that overall assessment. I think that into number 3 as well. I'm not sure about that.
I think that's some good comments that Bruce has made, and also Mr. Ford. I think we have to remember too, as we're looking at this, that we're looking at old data. You know, they didn't have the testing. I think there was some promise, at least in the December testing that was done in the high schools with the end of course testing that was there. So, I mean, I think there seems to be some slivers of light starting to show in these schools, and you know, I think it's kind of difficult with us not having all the data that we would usually have, especially when it comes to making recommendations and evaluating how they have performed so far when we're just basically missing a year of data.
Good morning, Ashley. This is Lynn Kroger, and yeah, Bruce and Joel, you do bring up very good points, and thank you for your input on that, and great job on this report. This was very, very informative, so thank you, Ashley. I just had one really quick question though. As far as the funding, the state funding, they don't receive part of the state funding due to the low wealth piece, and I think there's another piece I didn't get. Do you know on average how much they do get per student?
I do not offhand. I could.
Is there an easy way for me to find that out? Do you know?
Yeah, I can ask school business for sure.
Okay, thank you.
And Ashley, this is Jeanette. I just have a clarifying question also. On the graduation rates, I just want to clarify that you said that the graduation rates across the country are for virtual and cyber schools is about 50%.
That's correct.
And
That's
so-
the latest data I have was from the 2017-18 year. But yes.
Okay, and so cyber's at 51 and virtual's at 71%, and not to hold ourselves at a low standard, but I think it's important context to have that information. Thank you.
Ashley, this is Rita Hare. I have a question. Have you looked at what other states or what other cyber programs are doing as far as school improvement?
Yes, there is. There's actually been quite a bit of movement in terms of, you know, there's a lot of legislation that gets pushed through different states, and it really, I mean, it just runs the gamut. Some of them are, you know, I did see some states that were reducing student to teacher ratios. There's a lot of, you know, changes in how schools report. There's some, you know, funding changes, but it's also, you know, it's also important to note that for North Carolina, we're very unique. And a lot of these states that I looked at actually have much, much larger populations in their virtual schools. And then there's, you know, and then there's a lot of states that have just kind of very small virtual academies. So it just runs the gamut of what these schools look like, which is why I think it's really important to try to get more data on our 2 schools and their programming.
Good, thank you.
Ashley, this is Hilda. I was trying to find where there is something related to how the teachers are evaluated in this type program.
Yeah, I believe that they're both the schools use the NESIS of the normal state evaluation program, but I could check on that. I did not look into that.
Thanks. Great job.
Thank you.
Ashley, with regards to the recommendations, I am definitely in favor of number 4 being in there. I mean, it's just a must. Their data needs to be separate from all the other charter schools. I do like the comments that Bruce and Joel made. I think the surveys being provided through an external evaluator is probably a necessity. And of course, you know, with Bruce's background in virtual charters or virtual schools, he would think of that. So kudos to you, Bruce. But I'm all for increasing the strength of the recommendations because, like Joel said, their performance is just unacceptable. I know that parents want to have this option, but as it is right now, it's just not hitting the mark. I fear that these kids are not getting what they need.
So am I hearing that perhaps you guys would like to try to schedule a quick called meeting maybe in maybe a week or two to finalize some recommendations and vote on it?
I guess I'm wondering, there's not comfort with the recommendations that are proposed here in general?
Alex, this is Bruce. I don't know if I'd say it's lack of comfort. I think that there's some, I'm just basing this on my experience, and I've done these type of reviews of virtual programs around the country that I think there's some things that might just be, that we might tighten up a little bit. That's all.
Alex, this is Joel. So again, Ashley and Alex, this is not a reflection on the work product that was produced by staff, Ashley or our staff. I think this is a result of the data that is available. And so there are some good recommendations in there to improve that. I think we just need to add to these recommendations. And I don't want to be redundant, but I outlined some of those in the beginning of my comments. And so I'm not sure if we need to get another meeting or if folks need to send things in, but what I do know is that to me, the recommendations are incomplete and that we need to send a message to the Joint Legislative Educational Committee and to these two programs that their academic performance is not acceptable and that we need to have, we need to see an updated improvement plan in order for us to feel better about the direction that they're going in, and a document, in my opinion, Mr. Machado, that we can hold them accountable to going forward for academic and student improvement.
I'm all about improvement and everything. It's just they've got an improvement plan in place that they've been working through, and we haven't got to see the results of that yet, and we're talking about asking them to change it. You know, just because we didn't have, so we don't have the data. That's the only issue that I have with, you know, requiring more or a change to the improvement plan that we haven't got to see how the improvement plan that they're working now has gone.
Have we even seen the improvement plan? I don't know that I would suggest that it needed to be changed. It's already, you know, they're working through school improvement. I would like to see it though.
Agreed.
I could definitely request that and have that, you know, it merged into the report as an appendix. As Mr. Walker stated, both schools should certainly have improvement plans. So those could be added. And I apologize for not having those already.
Also, this is Dave again. This is actually, this report, there'll be another one in 3 years, is that correct?
Yes, in 2022, around this same time, so about 2 years,
okay.
We will need to report again to the General Assembly prior to the closure of the pilot program.
And Mr. Ford, I totally agree with you that the performance of these two schools is unacceptable. I do question whether the goal of this report was to try to hold leadership, the school leadership accountable. That is done at their board level, which needs to be done and needs to be done often. But I'm not sure that it's our place to hold that board accountable. It is certainly our place to make recommendations for improvement. I think the State Board of Ed and the General Assembly is the one that will ultimately hold them accountable.
Thank you for that comment and reference, Mr. Machado. My goal is in our evaluation of the programs that would include the leadership and management of the programs. It's like we're dancing around the issue here. And I understand who's ultimately accountable for the programs, but if we're going to have some oversight of virtual and charter programs, I don't know how you can effectively do that without looking at the management and leadership of the programs. And maybe you guys know more than I know, because ultimately, if we're going to make recommendations, the recommendations that, in all fairness to Ashley, are limited.
I worry a little bit about, this is Alex, I worry a little bit about us getting too far in the weeds on or micromanaging here. I mean, we've applied a lot of pressure in the various ways that these schools have come before us. We've seen a significant and very positive change in NC Cyber. I feel a lot better about the situation that they are in now than they were before. And and the same thing, K-12. I mean, the most recent presentations that we had on data from them, it has at least I was very impressed with their principal and in how they were approaching the gaps that they saw instructionally. I also just think I have to name that I think it's kind of ironic that, and honestly, we have so many schools right now doing remote learning, and we have a very strong data point that suggests that remote learning is not super effective in virtual schools. And, but if anything, these folks probably gained some ground on other surrounding schools because they didn't actually miss a beat when the rest of us lost, arguably, schools that did not do it well. And there's a lot of data that suggests it wasn't done at well or at all for about 3 months. Whereas the virtual people in virtual schools actually, were able to maintain their program without missing a beat. I'm comfortable with the recommendations. If that's not the pleasure of the board at this time, I would suggest that we have an ad hoc committee that would draft some revised recommendations, and we have a call next week to move this forward.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Chairman. I can go ahead and tell you right now, I'm not comfortable in voting today on these recommendations. And I want to reiterate, it has nothing to do with the data and the recommendations that have been presented. I just think that there is some things that can be added to help improve upon the transparency and accountability of the report and the recommendations, so that ultimately any kid in the state of North Carolina that goes through these programs is getting the best that we have to offer. And right now, based upon the limited data, based upon what we know right now, that is not working.
All right. So other folks on level of comfort with the recommendations as they're currently.
Alex, this is Cheryl. Joel, can you give me some idea of what kind of recommendation you're talking about. I agree, obviously, that the performance of the virtuals isn't what we want at all. But I guess I don't really understand what kind of recommendation we would give that would hold them more accountable, since the legislature really gets to decide what happens to them. We don't.
Well, I don't want to send, if we have access to, for instance, their student improvement plan, or the plan that they have, supposedly supposed to have as it relates to the performance they have, I think we have to highlight that and add that to our report as an amendment or as an addendum to this report, because again, I don't want to give the false impression that what we are recommending, and I don't think anyone on this call will agree that what we're recommending is going to have a significant improvement. And so I understand where the accountability lies with the board and with the legislature, but if we're going to have some oversight of these two programs, I think it's incumbent upon us, with what we know and what we can recommend that they do to improve. Ultimately, it's going to be up to the administrators and the board, right? But since we've got some hand in this, I think looking at the administration and the leadership and the student improvement plan will help shed some additional light on things that can be done to improve and to hold accountable.
Alex, if we want to do like a subgroup that would get together, maybe with Mr. Ford and with Bruce and anybody else who would like to contribute to that, I'd be glad to work with that subgroup if you'd like.
Okay.
I think that's a good suggestion. I appreciate that, Cheryl.
Okay, so I'm going to propose that. Dave, is this going to disrupt the? It's not going to disrupt the state board's calendar, because I'm sensitive to.
No, it won't, Chairman Quigley. I think that this committee would need to move fairly quick, try to get the work done in a week, and then no later than the following week to have another called meeting. But it can all be done before October state board meeting. I think the October meeting is on, it would be October 7th and 8th. So we actually have 3 weeks before then. So I think we could get this done. This ad hoc committee's got to realize that they'll need to meet with Ashley and OCS pretty quick to bang this out so we can get CSAP back together.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll propose that we have a ad hoc committee that Cheryl will chair. It includes Mr. Ford and Bruce Friend and anyone else that wants to join. You all will have an opportunity to revise the recommendations and then present them to the board as soon as next week. We'd probably say like next Wednesday or Thursday, I guess, for a brief called meeting so that we can send the final recommendation to the board.
Okay, can we identify who else might want to be on the committee so I can coordinate some dates, talk and with the OC?
All right.
Chairman Quigley, can we go ahead and set a date for the next CSAP meeting, maybe either September 28th or 29th? That would give this group a week and a half.
Yeah, the 28th is preferable to me. And if you're interested in being on the committee, put it in the chat box. Out.
And Cheryl, Ashley and I will work with you on setting up some sort of committee meeting, okay?
Yes, thank you.
So let's tentatively plan for Monday, the 28th at 9 a.m. for the meeting. Call meeting.
So, Mr. Chair, are we officially tabling?
Yeah, I believe we're tabling the report until further recommendations. I don't know if that needs a motion. I think it might as well do that. Okay, so I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we table any further discussion of this report until September 28th.
And here's the parlay seconds.
Properly moved and second, and I'll take a voice vote on this. I think it's probably.
Discussion, can there be discussion?
Oh yeah, discussion, any discussion?
If we decide we can join later, will there be a link or something provided to members? So if we're capable of joining, we could.
Yeah, absolutely. My other question would be, Dave, if the committee, can the committee do the work offline without having a meeting so they don't have to notice it, stream it, all of that? Like, what are the rules around that?
If Ms. Lucas is on the phone, she can comment on that. If not, we'll get an answer for you. We'll get an answer for the committee and get back to you then.
Yeah, just want to do this as efficiently as possible. So you all check your email for dates and information. We have the initial committee group and any further discussion on the motion. All right, we'll do a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right.
Okay. Thank you. We are back to interviews.
Okay, but before we move on, I want to publicly thank Ashley for the work on this report. She's been working on it for about 4 or 5 months now. It is a lot of work. And I know the comments were not directed at the quality of the report, but Ashley, thank you very much for another fantastic job.
I want to second that, third it too.
Yeah, excellent work, Ashley.
I mean, detailed galore.
Okay, can we take a 10-minute bio break here? Take a quick break before we transition into, yeah, I'm getting yes, please from Sherry, yeah. All right, we'll reconvene at 11. Let's make it 11:15. So you got 10 minutes, folks, to look away from the screen. Now you know how the kids feel. right, we about ready to rock?
If you say so.
Let's do it.
I haven't heard that in a while.
Let's get going.
Old school.
Good morning, Chairman Quigley and CCF Board. It's Dr. Jones getting ready to start the interview process today. Were there any questions about the process or the overview we did yesterday that I could answer before we begin? All right, first order of business, we had one of our applicants withdrew yesterday or later last evening. Spartan Charter, the letter that they sent us is posted, and I'll just read that for you really quickly. Dear Mr. Machado, regretfully, our Spartan Charter School application has encountered resistance from external forces beyond what we feel is healthy for everyone concerned. The toxic environment is not amenable to productive working relationships. Our intention has been to create a new school in partnership with an established charter school that could provide outstanding opportunities for children and young people. We are disheartened and believe in the effectiveness of this application replicating Chatham Charter academic program. However, distractions from its intent cause me to now request that the 2020 Spartan Charter School application be withdrawn from consideration. We appreciate the professionalism of the Office of Charter School staff as well as their guidance through the application process. Sincerely, Julia Brent, Miller Holland. Are there any questions? And I believe the impact statements from both LEAs are in your packets if you want to read those, if you get an opportunity to do so. All right, Ashley, we ready? So I present to you today for your consideration Old Mainstream Academy. Here's a copy of the Robinson LEA. There are 6 schools within 5 to 6 miles of their facility location. There are 2 charters in the county presently. Next slide. And here's just a general overview of the application. K-8 going from 200 in year 1 to 440 in year 5. There's a breakdown by grade level of what they're going to add each year. Food service, yes. Transportation, yes. Weighted lottery, yes. Again, facilities verified all submissions concerning their facilities. And at this time, I'll turn it over to our committee chairperson who's leading this today.
Thank you very much. I'd like to have if the board is there, I'd like to have them introduce themselves, and then we can start to talk about the application. Board of Old Main.
Good morning. This is Rosemary Lowry Townsend. I serve as the chair of the Old Main, what's that name? Old Main Academy. Would like to begin by letting you know that our mission for this school is to engage students in the STREAM disciplines that will prepare future leaders who are innovative, persistent, and self-determined. I am Dr. Rosemary Lowry Townsend. I have spent over 34 years in the educational system of North Carolina. Started as a classroom teacher, a writer, principal of both an elementary and middle school, assistant superintendent of human resources, and then a school superintendent. I hold a BS degree in elementary education, 2 masters, 1 in elementary education and 1 in curriculum and instruction, a 6-year degree in school leadership and administration, and a doctorate in school administration. I have developed and implemented budgets as large as $100 million, and I have been responsible for the payroll of over 2,000 plus employees. I have been responsible for the budget in building 3 new schools and mini budgets for renovations of school needs. I currently serve as the manager of 7 Boys and Girls Club with the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina, located in 7 different sites in 3 different counties. And I have over 32 employees that work for me, and we service over 550 kids per day. At this time, I would ask the rest of our members to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Dr. Brenda Dial-D, and I have over 30 years in public and higher education. I retired in the position of Director for Student Services in a large school district. I'm credentialed as a licensed clinical mental health counselor supervisor and a national certified counselor. I've advocated for students that in a district that's recognized as one of the most diverse counties in the nation, and it was distinguished by complex issues. So I work with school counselors and social workers and high populations of students with 504. Also, I supervise school counselors and social workers and homebound teachers. I work with federal funds, the RLIS, and design those programs to work at indicators to work with those complex issues. I've also worked with MTSS and did professional development and wrote grants. I've been a school counselor and a classroom teacher. And I also work with adjunct with the school, with the UNCP. Most recently, I was appointed with the NC State Health Administration and Human Services, and I work on a committee with behavioral health. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Dr. Tiffany Locklear.
Excuse me. We already have your resumes and your board things. If you could just introduce yourself and your position on the board.
Absolutely. Thank you. My name is Dr. Tiffany Locklear, and I am a board member for Old Mainstream. My name is Dr. Denise Hunt, and I'm a board member for Old Mainstream as well.
My name is John Lowry, and I'm a board member for Old Mainstream.
We would also like to recognize with us here today our General Counsel, Ed Brooks.
So my name is Ed Brooks. I've been a licensed attorney in North Carolina for 17 years. I serve as a board of trustees member for UNC Pembroke. I'm the board chair for the Town of Pembroke Planning Board, and I serve as a parents attorney with the local DSS agency in abuse and neglect cases represent parents.
Okay, thank you. As we're talking, today we will only be talking with board members, but of course, you're certainly welcome to consult your counsel as necessary. To the committee, I want to start with, let's kind of just go through the app and talk about some of the things we'd like to discuss with them, starting with acceleration, with that, of course, being the most important thing at this point. We are looking at how, I can't think of the word right now. You know what I mean. How, why can't I think of the word right now? That whether or not there's a compelling need. Thank you. And also facility. So what comments do board members have relative to those issues?
We did 6 points for acceleration, the urgency for innovating across the school program.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant our board.
Oh.
I meant our, I'm sorry, I should have been more specific. I meant our committee, I'm sorry.
Well, Cheryl, that's good for Ms. D. She was quick on her feet.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Sherry?
I said that was good for Ms. D. She was quick on her feet. I have a comment, if I may, Cheryl.
Please.
As far as compelling need, I think the board has put together a pretty clear demonstration that there is a compelling need in the area, especially with the public schools of Robinson County. We know unfortunately, their reputation precedes them. So I feel strongly that the compelling need piece has been met. My questions are just in relation to the facility. I understand that there's a facility, the Lindsay Hall, that's right across from UNCP. But as I got into the operational side, was reading that description, then I became confused because it was speaking of a cafeteria in a different place, and then Odom Hall was mentioned, and the diagram that we had was Lindsay Hall. It shows about 18 classrooms, but they're not all equal in size. So anyways, facilities are the biggest issue for me. It does look like there is a lease ready to go, but you know, will this facility compensate or capacitate, I should say, all the kids for next year, and how far out will that be?
Okay. Any other comments relative to acceleration or facility?
I agree with what Sherry said. I really, I think the facility is going to be fine there. I think you can work with it, and I think they can figure it out. It looks like a nice facility, and looks like it's ready to go. And I do think that there is that urgency here, and that there is kind of a groundswell of support in the community. And I'll just say, since I've got the floor for a second, I think this application is so much improved over last year. I just think it's a much better application. To me, the thing last year that made this not go was the red pedagogy and the talking about that and that book that had just so many objectionable things in it. And with that being taken out, which was really my sole reason last year for saying, I don't think we can go with this. I think it just looks so much better. And, while I'll have some questions, I'm sure, I just think the need is there. The groundswell of the community support is there. And I just thought that the application as a whole looks so much better.
Cheryl, this is Sherry again. Can I make
Go ahead, Sherry.
Stephen, you're right. The application is much better. I will say that in the bylaws, red pedagogy is still referenced. So I think that piece would need to be corrected in the bylaws.
I agree.
That's something that can be fixed easily in RTO. I agree with Stephen. I think the application is so much better than it was last year. I really like it. I feel like I have a better idea of how they're planning to use STEM to run the school. And for the first time now, I really get the whole place-based education thing. Because before I thought that was tied to the red pedagogy, but in this application is clearly tied to STEM. And so I agree that, and I think the need is there. So if there are no objections, then it sounds like people feel like the acceleration bar has been met. And so then let's go on and talk through the application itself. Let's start with mission, purpose, and goals. Any comments about mission, purpose, and goals? I feel like the goals need to be strengthened. I didn't feel like they were SMART goals. It's something that can easily be done in RTO, but I do think that if they move forward, that in RTO the goals need to be strengthened to SMART goals that are easily measurable.
I agree with that, Cheryl. And that was a comment that I made in my evaluation, that the goals were not written in SMART format. But I know if we end up moving this application forward, that's something Claire and her team will certainly make sure is tightened up.
Anything else on mission, purposes, and goals? Okay, let's move to the ed plan.
Back up just a second, Sharon. This is just a comment in general. They were very specific in their EC population and EL population. I mean, specific to that, they were going to have 23 EC children and 9 EL students. So I was just a little like, where did that come from? But that's just a thought out there.
Okay. Ed plan?
This is Alex. I think the ed plan is improved, and I feel better about it. I guess I'm gonna ask the same question that I asked last year because it still has. I think it's still written a little bit more like if I was writing a college paper than writing a kind of a pitch to a parent or a concise case statement for the school. So I think my question is, I'd just like to hear a board member or some board members kind of give me the concise, tell me about what the school is about and why it's compelling for me as a parent to send my child here. And so that's my question. Before I get to that, I just want to echo the other statements around the improvement of the application. Also, just some things that, because we're in that process of evaluating these acceleration, and I think it's always important when we see one that meets the criteria that we just call those things out, because while that we're not comparing the applications against each other necessarily, I think it's important to kind of recognize, it's kind of when you see the model, then you're able to assess whether or not that exists in other applications. So not everything in here is a model, but I think things that were compelling to me is a very clear facility that's going to be looks to be like an excellent starting place and a location for the school. Two, it's on a college campus, so we have a partnership with a local university, which is something that we've named as being critically important. Also, this is a group that has been before us before, who we encourage to come back for acceleration. And there is the niche and the focus is really specific and unique, rather than just we need a school because there's just homeschool and private school students that on wait lists at other charter schools. That is a need, but it is not a compelling need. It is not a unique need. It is not something different. And I think we've already seen some examples of schools basically giving us what I would argue is standard need, or something that is not meet that bar of clear and compelling. So I think I just wanted to kind of name those things about why I feel it meets the acceleration threshold. And it's good to see those, and why it's important. So I just want to make sure that we're, hey, when you see it, let's call it out and name it real specifically so that we know what we're looking for in the future. Now I'll come back to my question. Give me the rundown. What's the educational vision of the school? Think about, you're talking to a parent or some community member. Like, what is the school about? Who wants to kind of answer that question?
This is Brenda. So I think that if I were talking with a parent, one of the things that we really need to focus on, and it's of interest to the community, is the economic growth. And that connects straight to the STREAM model. So you have the STEM, and of course, workforce tells us we have lots of research there that tells us that if we grow in the STEM area, then that is going to improve our economic well-being. And that is something, along with the college and career readiness, that is something that is very much of interest to our community specifically. We also know that, the reading, there's a huge proficiency gap. And, so that is where we want to develop that academic identity. And we understand that has to happen in elementary. That has to happen. That has to be a part of the foundation. And so, we want to talk to our parents. That's a really good indicator and trigger for parent engagement. How do you read at home? What's going on? In some of those parental engagement activities. So we believe that, with the economic growth and improved academic identity, or, identifying strengths of the individual student, that is going to be a huge selling point to our community and to the parents, in the county itself.
And I would just like to point out for our parents, because we are charter schools, there's a lot of misinformation out there about what charter schools do, what they're allowed to do. And so we would definitely let our parents know that we are the backbone of our work is the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. So our standards are coming from something developed by North Carolina. And, we're using STREAM or STEM as a means to really take that standard course of study and using our curriculum to really make those standards come alive for our students.
And another point there is, STEM really supports that, you identify, you use active learning, and active learning is the more structured learning. So you have all these instructional strategies that are really, they're complementary to underrepresented students. So you've got the inquiry-based, you've got the hands-on, you've got all those instructional strategies that are supported by the STEM process itself. It's complementary, and it's enticing to students.
I think that those are all things that I think you need to work on your elevator speech, but those are the things that I agree that parents are going to care about. I think one of the things that is particularly appealing about your program is how much hands-on is available, and the types of strategies you're planning to use for instruction are engaging for students. And so I think playing that up is important.
Sure. I would agree with Cheryl. We gotta get this really concise and really clear, because again, a lot of this, reads more like. I think one of you is a college professor, actually.
No, I think several of them are.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, but it reads like a textbook I think I read in my master's program. But could someone kind of help me understand a little bit more about the connectivity movements and kind of describe that? There was a lot of that referenced, and then some diagrams, and that was a thread that I saw throughout that plan.
Okay, so that actually those are overarching principles from the STEM rubric that is really developed by the DPI. It's developed by DPI and the Friday Institute. So those overarching principles, it's like 5 critical domains that you would want to occur daily in your school. So, it's student opportunities and how those varied instructional strategies and the varied assessment. So that, you have students there, and daily, not only are they learning something new, but if they don't succeed the first time, then they have reoccurring opportunities for it to be learned. And then you also have the classroom environment and what that means. The sense of belonging, and to develop that academic identity, and to think that that's like a cool thing, in the classroom environment. So you want to do that. And you also, at that part, you want to also have the teachers able to integrate content. So even though you may be teaching science, what is something that is interesting to this particular group of students, and how can you integrate it into the lesson itself? And then, of course, your school structures. So all of those, and I won't go, but school culture and community connection. So we really believe that each one of those overarching principles, or the connected movements, that it was critical to have that in the daily operation of the school, and even when the school is not operating on the normal schedule, because it is about the community, it is about involvement, it is about engagement. So it's something that it's almost like an identity itself, where students can go out and say, hey, I go to Old Mainstream Academy. And it's kind of like something, it's a badge of being proud, because we know every day these things are going to happen.
Great, thank you.
All right, I've got a couple questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Sarah.
go ahead. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, the first one is, can you promise me that red pedagogy is not going to be a part of this education plan at all?
Yes, I mean, first of all, let me reference a statement that we wrote about red pedagogy by one of our board members.
Thank you. Due to the feedback from this committee last year, our board has decided to remove red pedagogy as part of our educational curriculum. Even though last year we incorporated red pedagogy as a way to be innovative with our students' learning environment, we found out that instead of it being seen as innovative, it was seen as too critical, and that is not what we want for our school or our students. We are much more concerned about providing solid educational foundation for the students in Robeson County, and because of the very negative connotations with red pedagogy, we have removed it, and it will not be considered again as part of any of our instructional practices. The future of our students is more important. The public schools of Robeson County is now on their third superintendent in 5 years, and the need for additional educational options for our families is great and needed now. And we have removed red pedagogy in order to move forward quickly with providing school choice for our children.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you. Would be my second question, and try to do it as very simply as possible. You got an R in stream, and it's for reading. So give me a 30-second response. Explain your reading plan to me.
If you look at the data for our students in Robeson County, one area that is extremely lacking is the reading component. Our students enter, unfortunately, into our schools with a deficit in that area. So we really thought, when we looked at STEM and we looked at the data, we knew that we could not ignore the reading aspect, and we knew that it was something that we needed to put in there. And so we start off, that's something that is integrated into the STEM, and we are using that as a way to teach our students to be, even though STEM is the orientation, we want to teach reading from the beginning, from the time they walk in. We want to put books in their hands, and we want to start that reading process with them.
Right. So let's say I'm dad that is got a kid, and we're considering Old Mainstream Academy, and I say, how are you going to make sure my son knows how to read?
Reading is infused in everything that we do with our students, because we know that they're coming in with those deficits. So we have programs that we have already in place that we plan to put in place. I think that our program is Fountas and Pinellas, which is a research-backed program, so that we know that that's the first thing that we're going to do. But reading is if you look at all the research, and there's so much new research out there about reading is a science, and how you have to really attack it from that perspective. And so we really have to go in and start breaking down the reading for our students. But more importantly is, the parent component that is missed so often in situations like this, is that we exclude our parents from that. And so we're bringing all stakeholders on board with the reading piece. So it's
Okay.
not just something that happens in the classroom, it's something that is integrated in every part of their world.
I'm a daddy, and in this thing, I understand what you said, but I'm the daddy. You're trying to sell me on the school. That just went totally way too high level. I mean, tell me. I mean, I want to know, how is my kid going to be able to read? What are you going to do that he can't get in Robeson County Public Schools?
So what we're going to say, and I'm going to be honest with you. So when I was a little girl, my grandmother couldn't read, and that's who I spent the most of my time with. And they relate to those kinds of relationships. But she would have books, and we would look into books, and we would make up our own stories. So those are some of the strategies that you use, and parents like to hear those types of things because it reminds them of their own learning experiences, and it reminds them of how they became strong in some of the areas that they are strong in. So we do need to have that parent involvement, and the school itself. Then we are going to take care of what we need to take care of. We are going to have the programs there for our kids, and then we're going to share information and how they're doing, not only at PTOs or student-led conferences, but anytime the parent has a question about the reading piece, because that is, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, that is one of the most critical pieces that we have to do here in our community. And the county itself, because of the deficit, our proficiency score was 25%. And I looked at some of the data last night for the local high school. Even though they've met growth, they're not increasing in the reading proficiency. So it's where you actually have to sit down with your parent and say, okay, this is the way, this is our plan, but we want you to have books, and we want you to open those books, and we want you to look at the books, and if you can't read, then use your imagination, and let's make up stories. Let's get the reading brain engaged.
And one of the other things that we have done as it relates to reading is we're going to look at that child's reading level, and we're going to say, hey, this is where that child is. This is where that child is, and this is where I need that child to go. And we have developed some mentorships with the UNCP, like the School of Education and Service Learning, and so they can help us close those achievement gaps with new instructional strategies.
Ms. Turner, may I say something?
Please.
I think from the responses, you guys in your minds know what you want, what you're envisioning, but you're not answering the question, to the lay person. And I know it's going to be your teachers that you ultimately hire and your leader that's going to put this program forth for you. But I mean, you've got to be able to relate to them what your expectations are as a board. So, I mean, I'm looking at my notes from where I read the application, and, for the reading and literacy piece, you had listed, all the key things that you need to touch base on when you're learning to read. And this is what I was expecting someone to say when they were responding to Mr. Walker's question. Like, yes, we're going to teach your kid how to read because we're going to use these great programs like Dibbles and Fontes and Pinnell. We're going to teach the kid how to decode. And what is decoding? Decoding is breaking the words down. We're going to use phonics and teach the kid blah, blah, blah. All the things that you put in the application, but you didn't give in your response right there. So I really think, I know that you guys are very educated, but you need to make sure that you can put your vision into terms that the people who are going to be required to put that vision into action can understand, and that the recipients will be attracted to.
I agree with Sherry and Stephen, and that goes back kind of to the elevator speech thing. Initially, the board will be selling the school, And I know you have a lot of support because people trust you, but they also need to know what you're going to do for their child. It's clearly written very well in your plan. Your reading plan is great, but you need to be able to explain it to people so that they can understand it. And break it down to lay terms that people are going to understand. A parent understands, you know, we're going to use phonics, and we're going to teach your child how to decode words. They understand that we're going to teach comprehension, and we're going to do it across curriculum, because we're going to read about the things that we're studying, and then we'll use the same strategies we used in their reading class to be able to figure out what we're talking about in content. We're going to have a longer reading period than most schools have. Those are the kinds of things that are in your app. They're going to happen in your school, but you need to be able to explain to people.
Thank you.
Let me say one other thing with that. And as you said, it's there. And coming from the majority of my time has been spent in administration. I think one thing that as we go and we start to look, particularly at the head of the school, which will be the principal, we're going to have to hold that person accountable for what it is that we have laid out, what is it that we want to be, for lack of a better word, our policies and our plans. That person has got to be the person to see that that's implemented. That's where those visits to the classrooms, holding the teachers accountable, and us holding that person accountable. You know, that's where scheduling comes in, and monitoring. It's one thing to say that we have a written plan, but if the plan is not implemented, it's not going to do us any good. So when we go back to that, I think that's going to be something that we've got it laid out. I think we're going to have to go back to us holding that head person accountable, and then that person holding the staff, and that being communicated to our families that, yes, you know, this is the schedule. This is when these things are going to be taught. You know, if we don't have it planned out to that piece of it being implemented in the classroom, none of it's going to be any good. So I think that's a piece on top of what you're saying. There's another, you know, major piece to that. It's just holding people accountable for doing what we say we're going to do.
Go ahead, Bruce, go ahead.
I just following up on that real quickly. Have they identified who they anticipate to be the principal head of school? Is that a current board member or somebody else?
No, we haven't.
I agree with you. That's going to be that's probably going to be your most critical decision. Any other comments on the ed plan before we move on to governance?
I mean, I just, this is like the exact issue that we got at last time, and the feedback that we gave, and so if this were to move forward, like, this has got to get tightened, because and I don't know, I'm in support of this application. There's part of me that like wants you all to come back for like a 30-minute where the only thing you do is like give us the presentation that you're going to give to new parents or to an ed leader, where you're going to explain, like, here's our vision for the ed plan. Here's our vision for how we're going to teach reading in like the most concise and lay people terms, because we're just not, it does feel like we're grasping a little bit about the core components of reading instruction. And there are some really, I mean, this is not something that is the purview of only people that work in schools of education. Like, there's a lot of readily available research that should help you decide, like, we're going to do place-based education. So every reading text is going to be aligned to and correlated to nonfiction geography and articles that are tied to the experience of the local community. That's going to drive a lot of our curricular and text choices. We're going to teach a rigorous and systemic phonics program because we know that that has to happen for students who are who show up, who are potentially academically behind, and they need to be taught explicit, systematic phonics from day one. And we're going to pick rigorous texts once students are able to read to drive comprehension that's aligned to our vision of a community-based school and place-based education. Done. I just did it for you. And I don't even, you wrote the application.
Mr. Kriegler, I'd like to point out that that was not an elevator speech. I mean, you went on and on and did the same thing that you're accusing us of doing, which is really like, just, you did the same thing. I mean, it is very difficult, something like this complex, and condense it down into what you're asking us to do, because you just did the same thing we did. I mean, I sat and listened. You did use the same verbiage. You did the same thing that we did. You keep asking for these elevator speeches. Then in the next breath, you say it's in our application. So I'm really confused. If we've covered in our application, then the elevator speech, you keep saying that for the parents, which I definitely understand. And of course, when we look at our clientele and our parents, we will definitely tailor our communication to fit that. But we're coming before a board, and it looks a little different.
It looks different if you're explaining it to us. We've read the application. One of the things we have to be able to feel confident is that you are going to be able to recruit the kids you think, the number of students you say you're going to have, because that drives the budget. The concern has been that we've not been able to get you to be able to explain why your school is a good fit for parents. And that would make it difficult for you to recruit the students. That's why we're asking these questions. It's not because we don't understand what's in the application.
Absolutely. I think too that, you said it initially, our parents we've got a lot of support. We've got a lot. If you look at our Facebook, you will see, we've had a lot of communication. And, there is a certain amount of trust that that comes along with this, because we are all local. And so, of course, people know us in all those different kinds of roles that we live within the community and the county as well. So, I understand you're saying that we're speaking in standardized language, and we've got to break it down to our parents, and that's true. We do. We know that we've got to communicate with that community.
But we've been engaging our community. We have a Google site. We have a Facebook page. We really took your recommendations to heart last year. We went and we tried to really engage the community in the work that we're doing, and we're getting really so much positive feedback from us just saying, hey, we are really starting a STEM-focused school in 21-22 school year.
Is it stream focused?
If that's your elevator speech, then that's our elevator speech, is that we're starting a STEM-focused school in 21-22 school year. Would you like your children to be a part of this? That's really the message that we're kind of putting out as we go, and we engage our community, any of the stakeholders, and that's it. And you have to understand, our parents are so hungry for choice. That's where they're seeing it as an opportunity, as a choice. And you're asking us about an elevator speech, and that's it. Our parents are, guys, we're on third superintendent in 5 years. Our children are dying in those schools academically. And we're supposed to pit them up against students that are coming out of Wake County, but you want to get us here and pin us on the wall about an elevator speech.
Okay,
I gotta hold up. I'm sorry. Like, your response was, we're gonna look at books and make up stories.
You said nothing about systematic phonics. You said nothing about text selection. There's nothing in the plan about that. You have given no indication that you have any real understanding of reading instruction. And I'm sorry, what I said to you was in a far more concise and understandable. Stephen asked you, I'm a parent, tell me how you're going to teach my kid to read, and the answer was rambling. And I'm sorry, that's a question that you need to be able to answer, and the answer was not it wasn't sufficient, because what happens is,
you're right.
What happens is the state board is going to say, we read in the minutes that they said that their reading plan was to look at pictures and make up stories. And I have to be the one that stands before the state board and defends those questions. You don't get a chance to talk to the state board. I'm the person that has to talk to the state board, not you. So if this moves forward, I'm the person that has to defend your program, and I'm the person that needs to be convinced that you need to be able to give us a clear vision of what your program is. And I've listened to hundreds of charter school applicants at this point, and if I'm telling you it's not good enough, it's not good enough.
We understand that, Mr. Quigley. I think, and that was me that went from that perspective, and my mind had gone, where my mind was is that we do have a high illiteracy rate of our adults. And I mean, and that's just a fact. And what I was trying to convey was the fact that, and we have a lot of children actually that live with grandparents. So when you were asking me that question, how are we going to communicate this program to our parents? One of the things that I was taking in consideration is that there are high illiteracy rates already here, and it's intergenerational. It's not just the children that are in the school or the parents that are not, supporting. It's that has been a long-standing issue here. And when you speak to them, they're not going to know about systematic decoding or acquisition of language and vocabulary. They're not even sometimes going to understand the fact that when you read a book, you're building vocabulary. So I was trying to get into context, and sometimes it's very difficult when you understand your community and you understand how smart the board is that you're trying to communicate with, and you're in the middle trying to navigate both audiences. And we are navigating both audiences at this point, because just like we told you before, you have all these people who have actually logged on to the link and they're listening, so we know that they understand, and they're seeing how we're responding as well. So we want to make sure that we are being sensitive to both audiences, so to speak.
Okay, let's go on to operations. Governance and capacity.
I'm sorry. Cheryl, one comment on the.
Go ahead.
Dr. D, just in response to that, the application, I agree with others. It was very strong, and your description of the ed plan was very thorough, comprehensive. It goes quite deep, has overlapping components, and looks like you could get the job done. I thought one thing that was missing through the plan, as well as other areas, was data to support. I think if you tell a parent that 9 out of 10 children in the 3rd grade respond to this strategy or show growth in reading with this, if you're able to give them even the most basic data, people understand that and see the opportunity for success. So not just here with this point that everyone's trying to make, but across your application, I would like to have seen more data supporting that the strategies you're planning to use have been proven to be successful with your targeted population. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move on to governance? All right, any concerns under governance?
Cheryl, I just had a question about the churn or the membership. It says that there's a 3-year term, but there are no term limits, so I'm thinking that once a board member is elected, as long as they want, they can continue. And also just in the various, I like the way that, this board attached a lot of evidences with policy, but there are some inconsistencies, so I think they need to read back carefully through the policies and make sure that everything aligns correctly. For example, like, the governing board committee policy, it says that they'll establish 5 committees, but then it goes on to talk about 4 committees, and then further down it says 4 committees, but then lists 5 committees. That's just one example. I think the red pedagogy was actually in the meetings policy and not the bylaws. So just, you know, on the policies, and I'm sure that that's something that would be also.
They get approved during the RTO.
Yeah.
Yeah, those have to go in and be approved during RTO.
So is my thinking correct on the board membership? They can stay on indefinitely?
Yes, that's the way we have it set up. Even though, you know, even from last year to this year, we've got 2 new board members, 2 moved on, and we brought on 2 new.
Yeah, so Mr. Lowry's new and Ms. Hunt, right?
Yes.
And who did you lose from the board from last year?
Lamarck Harris and Dr. Joe Roberts.
That's right, because Lamarck was the former treasurer, I believe.
Correct.
Rita has asked, are the Lowrys related?
No. One spells it ER1, another one spells it R1.
Oh.
Major difference in Robinson County. That's an inside joke. I tell you, I won't publish it. It takes a lot to have an extra letter in your name. Let's say it like that.
Ms. Turner, this is Mr. Friend.
Sure.
I have a couple, this is Mr. Friend. I have a couple of questions. One,
okay.
If I may just, who on the board would be sort of the financial person with that background and experience that would work with the new school principal?
Because we do not have a person, we've got several individuals that have experience in finance. What we have moved on, if you check and look at our advisory board, we do have a very young person that has finished, that is seeking to become a CPA. She has agreed to work with the board as an advisor. And then also in the application, you see where we have also talked with an auditor that would be responsible for doing our audit review.
Okay, it's just food for thought. I just, you know, ultimately the board is responsible for the governance and the fiduciary fiduciary actions of the school. So having someone that's very familiar with perhaps school finance and specific to charter might be helpful. The other question I have is, and I apologize if it's in the application and I just missed it, but from a staffing standpoint, does the principal have a full autonomy to hire his or her staff? Is it the structure that only the principal is actually an employee of the board, or report to the board?
And the question is, if the principal is an employee of the board?
You're asking if the principal is the one that will be doing the interviewing and recommending? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Does the principal have the autonomy to hire the staff that he or she wants?
Yes.
Somewhere that the board is getting involved in, other than approving the contract.
Right.
Right.
So the answer is yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to operations. Anything in operations?
Cheryl, I had questions about the transportation piece. It said there would be a contract for the first 45 days.
Yeah.
And then buses would be purchased. I'm not understanding why that's happening. And a concern with that is after 45 days, you know, obviously you're already into your school year. Your teacher, it says teacher assistants will then become drivers. How are they going to be able to guarantee that they have the license, et cetera? Or is that going to be a part of the employment hire piece before they ever hire, you know, that they have to be certified or licensed? I also have questions about the lunch plan. It was very confusing. I think they said there was a cafeteria outside the building. I'm not sure what that means. And I think it also referred to a vendor, but also Campbell Soup partnership, and the county is CEP. So I just would like a little clarity on how they're working all those things together. Is the school actually paying for the students' lunches?
So our district actually qualifies for free lunch through the CEP program, serving breakfast and lunch for all students at no cost. It's a 4-year reimbursement option for LEAs and schools. So that would be the first option for us. That money is actually channeled to NCDPI from the federal government. It's like $4 per pupil. So that is our first option. Our B is we request to partner with our local school system, the public schools of Robeson County. They are currently partnering with another charter school. And then we also talked about if that partnership did not materialize for us, that we could provide packed meals for students through purchase. And then the Campbell Soup came in. Is around here, there's this low socioeconomic status. And so we may have some students that can't pack lunch if that becomes an option. And so we can partner with Campbell Soup to create a pantry for our students in case they come to school hungry. A lot of schools around here do the backpack meals, and we would like to mirror that. And so overall, I guess we're just saying that we're eligible for the CEP, and our county qualifies for that through the North Carolina Department of Instruction. There is a lunchroom available on the site. So the Odom home is different buildings. It's one big place, and so the owner has agreed to allow us to use the lunchroom setting with our lease, and it's just a very short walk away from Lindsay Hall. And it's a covered building. Walkway.
Could you say that last piece again, Miss Brenda?
It's a covered walkway.
A covered walk.
From the Lindsay building to the cafeteria.
Okay, so the cafeteria is actually in the Odom home. That's why I was confused about the two facilities.
Yeah, so the Odom home used to place students that didn't have anywhere to go. So it's like different buildings that are situated in very close proximity of each other. And so we are actually leasing one of those buildings, but the one that we're not leasing actually has a lunchroom in it. And we have spoke with the guy who owns the Odom home, and he is saying that we can use the lunchroom. So our students will be able to walk from the Lindsay Hall into the lunchroom, and that walkway is covered.
And he's I'll give you that free of charge?
Yes, ma'am. There's no additional charge for using the lunchroom, and he's also offering like a multi-purpose room for us.
It's actually through the Children's Baptist Home. So they have been in contact with us and are actually excited about supporting this initiative.
What about the transportation question? You said you were going to contract for 45 days, and you were buying 3 buses. Why are you why aren't you just either contracting for the year? I guess you don't have the money up front to buy the buses, but why not just contract for that first year? Why 45 days is essentially the question.
Because we did a survey data, and based on that survey, many of our students will either be transported via a family member or they're carpooling. So one of the options that we have discussed is possibly organizing a carpool application for our website. So we were going to use that 45 days to make a determination.
Okay. All right, any other operational questions before we move to budget? All right, let's talk finances.
This is Rita Hare. I'd like to hear the team speak to the allocation of a half-time EC teacher during that first year, but a full-time media specialist. I just wondered about meeting the needs of the population that they're serving. If someone could speak to that, please.
We definitely wanted that media person full-time because of the R in stream, because we wanted to kind of scaffold reading for our students. So we felt like that media position was very important for us to enhance the reading. And then our EC population, we have a half population just based on some statistics of our county. I think our students are very overrepresented in our county. And we've discussed some instructional ways to kind of close that achievement gap.
The other issue there is, we're starting off with a K-3, K-4 population. And so, these students honestly have not been tested or identified because of the disasters that have occurred. So there is a lag in that, and of course, some of them may not, they may have chosen not to even enter into the system, the local, the LEA. We're dealing with both of those kinds of issues that they may not, if they're here, they've not been identified, and if they aren't here, then they, there might not even be the need at that point.
And we are prioritizing our budgetary need. And that's one of the first things that we really are looking at as far as money. If some money's become available, we're going to make that a full-time position.
Yes, we do have a $70,000 surplus in our budget, just in case we do have to hire that full-time EC person.
And we also have inside the budget some money for some contract services, particularly in the hearing, speech, those type of things.
So I see a comment from Ms. Sherry in that the students are overrepresented and also not identified. So when you look into our local school district, those students that have tested, they're usually overrepresented. Our EC population is overrepresented. So what we're seeing is coming from that K-4 population, some of them may not have been identified, or that testing might not have taken place.
Okay, I understand that, but it's unfortunately what you are going to encounter are those students who have been identified, and you'll just have to make adjustments in the budget if 30 of your 200 kids are identified or whatever. So I think we're just trying to let you know that EC is one position where you have to be very careful not to shortchange. For me in the budget, I feel like the administrator's salary is very low, as well as the teachers. But more concerning for me is, you're trying to change the trajectory of Robinson County and the students and their learning, but your teacher pay is low and you're not offering them any benefits. I know you say you're giving them a $2,000 stipend where they can invest according to their wishes. But I think it's going to be very difficult for you to attract a strong leader and excellent teachers based on those budget decisions. But at the same time, you have like $170,000 in the budget for curriculum and instructional supplies. So I think for me, this is the weakest part of the application. The budget is just all over the place.
Yes, this is Lynn Kroger, and I agree with you, Sherry. I felt like a lot of the suggestions that we made in the rest of the application were done, and I feel like the application's come a long way from last year. But as far as looking at the budget, I'm very concerned because of the aggressive enrollment. And yes, you do have a $70,000 surplus, but that really is not a lot. And there seems to be a lot of things that are underfunded, you know, like Sherry had mentioned, as far as the benefits, not having any bus drivers on staff. It does make me very nervous.
This is kind of gets to my question earlier, or just my comment earlier about if there was anyone on the board with specific finance experience in creating school and specific charter school budgets, because I would echo the comments of my colleagues. I think that the teacher salary at $40,000 is one thing. Not providing any benefits at all is, to me, that would be even more challenging to find. Even if you find someone who's willing to work for that salary at no benefits, it's going to be, I just base it on my experience as a school leader, that would be really difficult.
So one of the things that we have recently discussed is there's a new market tax credit for schools in the amount of $2.4 million. And Pembroke is actually an opportunity zone because of our population. So that NC access those federal dollar opportunities such as RLIS, Title I, and Title VI. And so this is tied to our economic development, which is only a fourth of a mile from where we're located. So we are looking at that new market tax credit to apply for that, and to assist in our finances.
And we've actually been approached with that. It's $5 million overall. So we've been approached with partnering on that. So for us, that would like really work for our budget.
You know, there's 5 categories that this tax credit venture has in it, and we are one of the top 3. And it could range from the whole $5 million being given to us getting a portion. That is yet to be decided. But we were approached with that, and our general counsel is also assisting with negotiations with that. So that is something that we feel we have a very good opportunity of being able to give to us there.
I understand that. I guess I'll just be blunt. I don't know where you find someone to work for $40,000 a year with no benefits whatsoever, retirement, health insurance, particularly in the heels of COVID.
Yeah, we've had people to approach us, and we actually did speak with teachers. And, you know, of course, the majority, and this is realistically speaking, the majority will either be new teacher or retired teacher. So, you know, but because we are partnering with UNCP, and we know that there is a pool of retired teachers, we believe that we can put a good team together.
Ms. Turner, may I interject?
Please do.
I think that we need to have Old Main Stream come back next month. And my thoughts behind that are, I think they need to seriously look at this budget. I don't know if we can allow them to. I think we should allow them to give us an amended budget where they, you know, look at these things that are truly weaknesses. And while we're at it, let them come up with the elevator speech for parents, you know, hey moms, hey dads, we're opening this school. This is what we're about. And give us those things. I just think they need to come back next month with a few things tightened up.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded that we invite Old Mainstream back next month for further interview. Is there any discussion?
I have something, Sharon. At the start of this interview, I would have said, no, let's just move them on through. You know, I'm trying to get a grasp on some of the hostility that there's been. I don't think anybody on the Charter School Advisory Board has, you know, really done anything to disparage. Actually, I think the reviews have been kind of glowing, except, you know, then I guess what my big concern is now, and I do think they should come back, and I'll support that motion, you know, is I hope it's not a sign of things to come if there's ever any constructive criticism that it's going to be instantly, you know, taken in the wrong way and go back, you know, on the Office of Charter Schools or on this board or whatever, because there has to be that working relationship there. And so, you know, I just hope that it would look a little different when we come back next month.
And Madam Chair, I'd like to hear more about the middle school return.
Okay.
Can you repeat that? We're sorry, we didn't catch that on our end. It cut off.
Ms. Parlay said she would like to hear, next month, she'd like to hear more about the middle school.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Quigley has asked that when you come next month, that you present a PowerPoint to us as if we were community members or parents.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's vote. Ashley, would you please do a roll call? This is a vote on the motion to invite Old Main back next month.
I will. Jeanette Butterworth,
Aye.
Joel Ford,
Aye.
Bruce Friend,
Aye.
Rita Hare,
Aye.
Lynn Kroger,
Aye.
Hilda Parlay,
Aye.
Alex Quigley,
Aye.
Sherry Reeves,
Aye.
Cheryl Turner,
Aye.
Heather Van Cannon,
Aye.
Stephen Walker.
Aye.
All right, it passes unanimously. Old Mainstream, the Office of Charter Schools will be in touch about scheduling your October round 2 interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm turning it back to you, Mr. Quigley.
All right, great, thank you. So we are ready for Mr. Machado, Director Machado's report. And then I'd like Ashley to just maybe give us a quick breakdown on where we stand with folks that we need to add for next month. We can get our head around what next month is going to look like before we hand it up.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Quigley. This is a pretty quick report. State Board of Ed has, at their last meeting, approved the 2019 Charter School Performance Framework. They approved your recommendation for PAVE Raleigh request to separate from their EMO. And they also approved your recommendation for TELRA to increase your enrollment and lower the first year's grades to K3. As Jay mentioned earlier this morning, there was an excellent presentation at the State Board of Ed on the NC Access Grant and Fellowship. Our Access team did a great job. We had 2 schools to come in and show some real innovative things that they're doing with this grant. Invest Collegiate in Nashville and Explorus in Raleigh, and it was so well received by the State Board. It just probably, in the 4 years that I've been in this position, that was probably the best, most positive charter school meeting that we'd ever had with State Board of Ed. And it just shows the exciting things that are happening with the NC Access team. We are also partnering with or collaborating with the Restart model team at DPI to do joint professional development with our low-performing schools and some of their low-performing schools. And through that conversation, we offered them 2 seats as in guest fellows. So starting this week when our NC Access Fellows Institute starts back up, there will be 2 principals from 2 different traditional public Restart schools participating. And I think that just an excellent example of our office collaborating with not only our DPI partners, but also with traditional public schools. And we're really excited that the NC Access team is allowing us to do this. And we're hoping that we can continue to do that in the future. Really excited about that. We continue to have office hours every Monday from 11:30 to 12:30 for charter school leaders just to call in and talk to our staff at the OCS team to answer any kind of questions. And we also started back up the bi-weekly calls with Dr. Stegall and Dr. Emery. And I'm happy to announce that we are in the process of hiring 2 new staff members. So our team will finally be fully staffed. Dr. Jones will be coming on full-time. He's been working in as a temporary capacity. Really excited about having him full-time. And the other person, we're still waiting for the paperwork from HR, so I can't really announce that name, but we're really excited about getting back up at full staff. And we will work on a meeting in October, being face-to-face. We'll probably send out a survey to CSAP to see if they're comfortable with having that meeting. And depending on what Ashley's getting ready to tell us, I don't think you guys want to come to Raleigh for 3 days. So, we'll be talking to leadership about how you want to do October's meeting. And I just want to close by saying that there is an awful lot of work being done by OCS staff. You can tell by the work that you heard today. Our work continues, plus having to adapt to COVID has been a real challenge. And I just want to thank my staff again for the great job that they're doing. They're just a great team to have, and they are really representing the charter school community very well. So that's all I have, and thank you very much.
Well, Dave, I would absolutely agree. You have a phenomenal team that pulls off, I can't even imagine. They pull off ridiculous amounts of work with very few people, and it's always quality work.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Okay, so we are looking, hopefully you can see it on my screen. We're looking at the applications we have set for October. So it looks like we will have 9 applications. We have 6 that are slated.
Say that again, Cheryl.
6 that are slated for round 1. We combine the EMO applications together like we did last year, so it makes more sense that way. So you will have one from Heritage Collegiate Leadership Academy, and then you will have 3 from Torchlight and 2 from Charter 1, and then we will have our second round interviews. So let's see, 9 hours. We don't have a lot else on the agenda right now, but that is sometimes subject to change. Are we feeling like we could fit this into the 2 days?
If we don't have anything else.
Yeah. The biggest thing
Just you, Ashley, is it so brain draining when you do that many at a time?
Yeah. We could definitely extend, let's see, it's October 12th, 13th, so it would be October 12th, 13th, and 14th if we wanted to go 3 days.
I mean, part of me feels like 3 days just in the morning until lunchtime could we do that?
Would that be remote? Because for me to travel to stay 3 days, for 3 half days.
That would be remote, I guess, in that case. Yeah, 3 days in person.
I just don't want to do this remotely if at all possible, especially with 9. I would be willing to do 2 days in person.
Yeah.
2 long days, maybe breaks in between.
Yeah, I kind of think that would be my preference. Because I'll have to travel. And so, that, my preference would be, let's just knock it out in the 2 days.
Same here.
Okay.
Yes, I agree with 2 days also.
If we do, otherwise, if it's remote, 3 days, half a day.
Remote is so difficult, and
No.
I'm particularly when you look at the ones where we're doing schools that are by the same management company, but we're going to be talking to different boards. That can get real confusing over time.
Cheryl, I'll trade yours with mine.
No.
All right, ladies.
Well, we can touch base again. Dave and I will have to discuss with, options in terms of how we could pull off in-person interviews with whatever the limitations are right now, and people gathering. I think it's less of a concern with just the board, but then when you have the people that also come for the applications, it makes it, it increases that group.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they would just have to they can only join during their session, and there's no audience members allowed.
Yeah.
Yes, could we have them still keying in like they did this time by us meeting?
I like that option, Sherry. Because they don't have to be face to face with us.
No. I feel like seeing the board and being able to have like an unfettered, unmuted and choppy conversation is so critical.
I agree with that. And with the sessions we had, it was difficult to see everybody sitting around that table, even though they were all there.
I think we just need to Dave and asked to have enough information, a good sense of the board it sounds like there's a good appetite among the board for an in-person meeting if we can pull it off. But I think there's probably going to be some limitations on whether that's going to be feasible, given the way that, I don't even think anybody's been in DPI. You all don't even go in there, right?
Rarely.
Yeah. So I think let's let them figure it out. We'll discuss it on our weekly leadership call, and we'll just update you all. So I would hold 3 half days or 2 full days, and we'll cycle back to you.
We have a meeting on the 28th, so we should be able to.
Yeah. So we'll circle back and let you know.
Okay, that works. Yeah, we'll think of some options.
Is it time for Stephen's motion?
Yeah.
If not, I'll steal it. With no further business, I move that we adjourn.
All right. Way to get in there, Hilda. Seconded?
Done.
All right. Probably moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All right. Great meeting, everybody. Thank you.
I was still aye. Okay.